When Jordan started talking about his vision for Peterson Academy, I thought to myself, this is fantastic.
When I signed up for Peterson Academy, I felt like I was digging myself out of a kind of hell. And I was able to start to actually aim up again.
I wanted to learn, I wanted to be part of the whole thing.
It was a bunch of people all together in a spirit of mutual play, aiming upwards. And that was a really cool thing to see.
And next thing I know, I'm deleted. I'm unpersoned, and so are a few others. All that progress, all that time, all my content just gone, and that goes for every single person.
I decided that I would rather live with the repercussions of whatever this ends up being than to hold my tongue.
This is my conversation with Frankie Joy Baylor and Dusty May Taylor. Her second time on the podcast, actually. Both Frankie and Dusty are students who have been expelled from the Peterson Academy. The Peterson Academy has been co-founded by both Mikhaila Peterson and her father, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is a Canadian clinical psychologist, author, and one of the most influential thinkers of our time, widely recognized for his thought-provoking commentary on subjects like identity, morality, and personal responsibility. He has authored multiple books, including Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, and his latest book that came out in November of 2024, We Who Wrestle with God. The goal for the conversation is to be constructive and to aim at something good, and also to talk about topics like leadership and how to deal with specific situation where there is confusion, for example, in teams or in families or in companies, and how to deal with that. With that said, if you enjoy the Jeffrey Van Leeuwen podcast, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. And with all of that out of the way, here's my conversation with Frankie and Dusty. All right, Frankie, Dusty, good to see you again. I think it's a good idea to go back to the beginning to see what led you to Peterson Academy. Frankie, can I start with you? What brought you to Peterson Academy?
Sure. So actually, I'd been following Dr. Peterson's stuff for quite a while. I think probably since like 2016, but then about a year prior, I had really delved into like his books and things, not just the snippets I was finding online in his podcast. And I went through both of his 12 Rules books, and they really helped me out in a time that was relatively challenging in my life. And I started listening more to his podcasts at that point and hearing him talk about Peterson Academy and his aspirations for that. And all of it sounded amazing. I had a strange experience in college at one point when I was I kind of came across some of the ideologies that he was going against. And so it really resonated with me. Like over a decade prior, I had been at a college and had run into an issue where there was a scholarship. I was really interested in it, but it was, as I read the fine print, it was only for people of African American and Hispanic descent or something like that. And I was really disappointed that I was like, wow, I literally fit all these other criteria of like income and everything else. I don't have the proper amount of melanin to make it work. And I it was some of that, and there was a scholarship thing where it just kind of made me raise an eyebrow. I was like, I thought this was not okay. Like I thought that this is kind of like racism, and I wasn't upset about it. It was more just like, huh, that's weird. This was back in 2012, and I came across some other things with like classes. They were really pushing a lot of ideologies and things that just I ran into an issue during college where they were having us read almost pornographic material, and I was asking if I could read Shakespeare instead, and was told no. So
What do you mean by that? By pornographic material in your school?
they were having us read stuff that was like incredibly like sexually explicit. Like in that particular class, I had a teacher who her recommended reading for that class, you actually had to go to these weird, shady corners of the internet to find, because some of the stuff wasn't even published in mainstream publications. And I ended up actually dropping the class because every week I was like, well, that's probably not stuff that is actually helping me write better. And I don't particularly want to be reading it. And the further I got into it, the class, like every week I was like, well, it can't get worse than this week. And every week it got worse. And so that was like, I was paying for that class completely out of pocket. I think I ended up walking away losing $1,200 back in 2012 that I had saved myself, because of the stuff that, and the teacher even had, it was called like academic freedom or something. So the teacher was actually allowed to permit me to read other material. And I actually specifically requested Shakespeare because at the time I was kind of writing a Shakespeare parody for my main project for the class. And so it would have went better. I was like, then I could actually learn something better. I could be devoting my time to something actually useful. And I even offered, I was like, I'll write you like a paragraph or something instead of taking the quizzes so you don't have to do any extra work. And I was met with a lot of resistance, and basically where it was possible for her to be able to permit me to read something better, that was not what I was able to actually do,
Right.
per her judgment call. So I just withdrew from the class, like, and it was one of those that I was enjoying the part where we actually were learning things, but I was like, this is not something that I'm okay with supporting, so I left. So when Dr. Peterson's stuff came up, I've already graduated. I already have a degree. I went back to school and I went for engineering instead of English because there are fewer strange ideologies and things you have to read in math classes. But it was one of those things where, okay, I have credentials, I have business experience. I'm not here for the accreditation. I'm here to have some personal self-improvement and maybe meet some people along the way. And so as soon as he announced it and he actually hit that price point of roughly $500, I was like, I'm sold, I'm in. If it had been the 1,000 that they had originally said, I probably would have held off, but the price point was right. And so I jumped right in. The day after they announced it, I was like, that's something I can do.
Right, and the first time they announced it, I believe, was in 2022, right? When there were talks about Jordan Peterson with, I'm not sure if his daughter was already in the picture, Mikhaila Peterson, but there were already talks about launching an alternative university to allow people to learn in an academic setting and to get, useful papers that they can use for their profession later on in life. That is devoid of ideology. I believe that started a couple of years ago already, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. I wasn't really following it as closely then. It was more the year leading up to its launch that I really was following more.
Right. Yeah, I believe. Maybe Dusty, you can confirm if this is true. I believe it started coming up in his podcast quite early on.
Yes.
When it was like still episode 100 or something like that. Maybe even less than that.
He had a dream. And it would just come out because it was something that was in his heart and in his mind. So you just heard it here and there, like popcorn,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a future desire for him.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Dusty? What led you to Peterson Academy?
For sure. Actually, this is a great contrast we'll have because we're coming from completely different places. And I think we both represent two significant demographics who were eager to attend Peterson Academy. So for myself, plug, like Jeffrey, you've already talked to me about my background on your podcast before. So I come from this crazy background where I'm very intellectually curious. I'm very open. I always wanted to go to university. It was not possible. There was a sequence of events at play in my life. I was one of these underprivileged people, I suppose. it just wasn't going to happen. And so when Jordan started talking about his vision for Peterson Academy, I thought to myself, this is fantastic. I could learn, it would be accessible to me. It's important to him that people of all kinds are able to, acquire an education and be recognized for it. And I was extremely interested in the fact that because he really emphasized his critiques of the universities, but he also understood what they were good for. So he would talk a lot about, at university, that's where you meet people who are like-minded. That's where you meet people who are, at the same intellectual level, of the same creative persuasions. And I have always felt that I missed out on a lot of that as somebody who wasn't able to go to university, but is kind of has this proclivity to high openness, kind of driven intellectually. I never got to find my people. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll find my people. And then down the road, if it's accredited, that would be fantastic because, that's an opportunity that I didn't have. But I really wanted the knowledge. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be part of the whole thing. And yeah, the price point, so my past year, I went through a terrible divorce from an extremely troubling marriage at the beginning of 2024. And then my sister died due to a drug overdose, just like a few months in. So at the end of July, and I was having a hard time because of the divorce. I was having a hard time financially. I actually couldn't even afford in Canadian dollars the $450 of the beta version where I was at. I couldn't do it. And a friend of mine was like, your mind needs this. Like, you should be there. You need to meet people who are also curious and you need this opportunity. So I actually had somebody pitch in to help me because of where I was at. And was like, oh, I guess I should do it. Should I? Should I not? Everything sucks right now anyways. But it turned out to be fantastic. I was so thankful once I got started and got to learn and meet people.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I guess I'll end with this. Like, by October, um, my financial situation started to improve, but because my 2024 was so shaky, I was not quite feeling steady, if that makes sense. But absolutely on board with the vision. I was so stoked. I was so stoked. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really quite something to experience. From the very first day, there was so much excitement going on in the social environment on the Peterson
Mhm.
Academy. Everybody was incredibly excited. There were all kinds of beautiful discussions going on. Memes were being posted, pictures were being posted, all kinds of philosophical topics were being discussed. It was really quite something to see. What were your initial expectations? So when you came on Peterson Academy, or even right before you came on, what did you expect? What the platform would bring you? Did you expect to
Mhm.
primarily focus on the course, for example, primarily on the social aspect, a little bit of both? And once you got in, how was that first experience for you?
Okay. Should I start? Because I as like a continuation, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
So when I first got to Peterson Academy, there was a thing that said like you're beta users, you're the first users, you're gonna have like a
Mhm.
torch badge as like the initial torch bearers, right? So I understood that, ooh, we're like the first explorers, creative
Mhm.
people. We could be
Mhm.
a little bit cheesy. Um, I was like, oh, this is great. But I thought we were beta. I will say I thought we were beta users of a more or less complete platform and enterprise. So some of the things that were advertised on the landing page, for instance, and were talked about were, these fantastic AI generated quizzes and exams and testing, like accreditation. That was kind of a dream still that they were working on. But there were these tests that you could challenge yourself, um, and that the social environment because Dr. Peterson had referenced it so many times. I did expect that, like I went in thinking there were DMs and thinking that there was like a somewhat functional social platform attached to it with like maybe discussion forums or something that you would expect for an online university platform.
Mhm.
And I will say I wasn't upset to discover how unfinished it was because I was like, all right, we now they really need our help. Like, let's champion this vision, right? That's the kind of people I think it attracted. Um, but it was a surprise. Like, you could fill in your profile and you could post in a main feed. and your main profile would have your posts, and those were the only features for social. Um, like, that was it. And then the AI quizzes I noticed on the courses, which the courses are fantastic. The AI quizzes were, maximum of 10 questions. They later went down to 5, and a lot of them were not logically coherent. Like they were not particularly challenging. So your score on a course session would be determined by answering a 10 question AI generated
Yeah.
quiz.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel accurate, and so I kind of felt like that that's so yeah, those that was my experience of expectation versus reality. But I was still just like, yes, we will make it great, because Jordan Peterson, um, I really agreed with him when he said, a lot of it is the people you meet, it's the connections, this is important. Yeah, that was my experience.
I'll just kind of tack onto that about the quizzes. Like some of the questions were very, very easy. Like there would be one that 3 of the answers were the name of uh, the person who was the focal point of the entire lecture. But then like another one would be something super obscure. Like the one of the first classes I took was one of the great leaders ones, and I was spending about 3 hours taking notes and everything. And one of the questions I had, like I failed to write down one particular like really obscure city that was mentioned like once for a half a second or something. And so like it totally varied. It could be something very, very simple, or it could be something incredibly uh, trivial, and it was difficult to prepare as far as whether or not, excuse me, yeah, it was difficult to prepare how you were going to effectively pull out the proper information for the quizzes, like what's actually useful and what's
Important.
not.
Yeah.
How do I prioritize what I'm learning about? So that was just an interesting bit of it. All right, so going back to the actual question though, for me, when I joined, I largely, not too unlike Dusty, I had kind of gone through a series of tragedies in my own life that very much upended the social foundation that I had. Um, and so I was kind of in this weird period of my life where, I had kind of picked up Jordan Peterson's stuff because I was like, man, I don't even know how to handle some of the things I've been through. Uh, I did not have any kind of a background in any kind of behavioral psychology or anything. So I was very much just kind of at a point in my life where I was like, well, something needs to change. I need to do better. I've known I've needed to do better. I just need something to give it more meaning, because the structure that had previously given me meaning throughout my entire life was no longer available to me. And so really it was kind of a way to spend time productively. Like I had a lot of free time to myself that I had never had before because I was very heavily involved in a group previously, as like a volunteer and stuff, and I had a lot to contribute. And not having that available to me, I was like, wow, I have a lot of time, for example, in the evenings. So I originally signed up with the intention of just being able to go through the classes and enjoy that. I knew there was a social side, but I didn't really have many expectations. I just watched all the every one of the trailers for the classes and was like, "Oh my goodness, this looks amazing." And I was sold there. I was blown away when I got in because in spite of the lacking features that Dusty mentioned, like I completely overlooked them because it was, well, for one, I was under the impression from the email that we got that it was going to be out of beta by the time uh the early enrollment stuff was over. So it appeared from the messaging that things were going to be relatively fully baked out within the month after we had signed up. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things. Um, But really, I got in there and I hopped on the social side, and it was such a pleasant surprise because there were all these amazing people in there sharing their pictures and their art. And I've never been huge on social media. Like, I've done stuff for work, but like I've not really done a lot of personal social media. Um, I've kind of grew up in an environment that was very skeptical of all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So I've been pretty private myself, and I just had so much fun with it when I was able to hop on there, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, there are people here who actually understand this Jordan Peterson stuff. Like, this is the stuff I've been enjoying myself and just kind of quietly, shyly, alone, you know, been enjoying and not sharing too much, except like with my family, much to their chagrin. Um, and it was like, oh man, there are people here who actually know his rules, and I can actually make jokes about or references to things that he says, and people here actually get it. um so it was this kind of amazing moment of, like, one of my first posts on there, I think like the day or two after it got launched, was just a picture of my hand and a cat. I literally found a stray cat on the side of the road one day when I went out for a walk, and it was just a picture of my hand and this kitten, and just saying, Rule 12, pet a cat when you see it on the street. And even that I was hesitant to post because at the time I had never really done a lot of social sharing before, and I was like scrubbing all the metadata so nobody knew where I lived and
Where
things.
it was.
And I was like, man, I hope this is okay. It was so like simple, and in retrospect that's kind of silly, but um it was this little group that I started to kind of feel comfortable with even from the outset, because everybody was very much of the same mind in that we all had an upward aim, and it was apparent that everybody who was kind of participating regularly wanted to do better. Um,
Yeah.
and that everybody was like, I don't know, very open and creative. There was like this trend that started within the first day, or maybe the first couple of weeks that it
Got it.
started, where people were posting their big five scores, and
Hmm.
a lot of people on there scored very high in openness, and it was cool to see like the differences. But there were some things that seemed pretty typical, like very high openness, very high. What would you say, Dusty? Was um extroversion also pretty high
The
up there?
the people who tended to post, rather regularly on the social platform tended to be quite high in openness, quite high in extroversion, and then quite low in agreeableness. Not all the way low necessarily, but like mid to lower. Um, and maybe not exclusively, but I saw a lot of that, and that could have to do with Jordan Peterson's fan base, because as much as Peterson Academy, has the slogan of like education devoid of ideology or whatever, that I think is extremely contentious. I'll just say I don't think that's accurate. Like it there is a very strong um ideology. And so I think it attracted people who have been a little bit disagreeable in terms of what's been going on sociologically in the broader cultural landscape, right? And so I think that's why we had a lot of people who were mid to low in agreeableness. Not exclusively, but would you say that's fair? Or do people know what Big Five is? Should we explain the Big Five traits briefly?
That'll be a good one. Can you do that, Dusty?
Mhm. So, Big Five personality scoring. So, think of Myers-Briggs or like Enneagram and this stuff that goes around. But the Big Five inventory has some sort of statistical accuracy. It's trackable. It's consistent over time. So, in the psychological community, they consider it to be a more accurate, more scientific representation and metric for measuring people's temperament, basically. And there are five traits. And so there is agreeableness, which is basically it scales into like compassion, and then your kind of your respect for authority, how agreeable you are. So if you're high in agreeableness, you're maybe more group oriented, compassionate, will negotiate on behalf of other people instead of yourself. And then disagreeable people who are low in agreeableness, they're going to more or less negotiate stronger for themselves, tend to be
Competitive.
competitive,
Hmm.
argumentative. They can be less compassionate, or they can just be very independent. I would say, right? That would be agreeableness. And then there's conscientiousness, which I think is kind of self-explanatory. These are people who are industrious, hardworking, task-oriented, um, meet their obligations, are orderly, things like that. And then there's extroversion, more self-explanatory. You're assertive, you're forward-moving, your energy is directed outwards, and you're enthusiastic about life. You want to jump into stuff. People who party, people who are entrepreneurs tend to be extroverted, right? Stuff like that. Neuroticism, everybody's favorite word, has the most negative connotation, but it's basically your susceptibility to negative emotion. So you can be volatile, or you can have a tendency to like be anxious and withdraw from people. More prone to depression if you're high in neuroticism. Also, stronger threat detection ability. If you're too low in neuroticism, you tend to be sort of blind to authentic threats, right? So women tend to be a little bit higher in neuroticism. And then you have openness to experience, which breaks down into intellect and aesthetic sensibilities. Somebody like Ben Shapiro, quite high in intellect, a little bit lower in aesthetic, like the artistic stuff. Then your artists are like just really into beauty. So yeah, openness is intellectual pursuit and like the love of beauty, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good explanation. Thank you for that. What my experience generally is, because I saw those big five assessments coming forward as well on the social feeds. To me, it seems to be quite diverse. You had people who scored very low on neuroticism, very high on neuroticism, or very low on agreeableness, or very high on agreeableness. So there seemed to be a set of people that were quite diverse in the temperament. Yet they came onto the platform with all with the goal of aiming up, of doing something,
Yes.
better for themselves and for the community, to be more productive and take their responsibility. That seemed to be a shared mantra that everybody on the platform had, which aligns perfectly with the vision that Jordan Peterson lays out in his books and in his podcast and in all the other works that he does.
Yeah, you know what? You might be right. I might have a bias, like where I notice people who are temperamentally more similar to me.
Same.
So I might not have noticed that statistically there was that much diversity. But as you say that, I think you're probably right. Because even if I look at the people that we're still in touch with, Frankie, they are actually quite diverse. Like high, like exactly what Jeffrey said, high neuroticism, low. Even the people who are either expelled as of today or who are conscientious objectors of a sort do tend to have the diversity he's speaking of. Do you think he's maybe more accurate?
Yeah, I would say the one statistic that I think somebody even at one point actually had put them into an Excel chart and had
I'm
actually
sure
been
they did.
statistically analyzing the average population of men and women and their scores versus the average of the men and women on Peterson Academy. And I believe the one that it wasn't all the time, but I would say the one that seemed most common to be kind of an outlier was the
Openness.
openness. Yep.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So specifically about the big five, because the big five tells you pretty much, it's like a range from 0 to 100, and it tells you how far in that range you are. So if you are looking at the agreeableness scale and you score 100 out of 100, that means you are very agreeable. And if you are 0, that means you are, very disagreeable.
And in percentiles.
In percentiles.
In percentiles. So it's relative to the population. It's not the trait metric.
Yeah, so if you score 90 out of 100, that would mean that if you walk into a room with 100 people, there's 10 people who are more agreeable than you are. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's very funny, because I talked to Adam Ayala. Adam Ayala is a psychoanalyst who also was on episode 7 about this, because one of the questions that I posed to him was that number that you get, is that a baseline that is fixed for the rest of your life, or is it something that is flexible over time? And pretty much, so we went a little bit back and forth with that, and pretty much what it means is it can change over time, which is literally, the thing of developing your personality. You can learn, you can improve yourself, and therefore You will probably not go from 0 to 100, but you can move in the middle a little bit. You can fine tune what is needed. So somebody who's, for example, very neurotic knows it from themselves, and it doesn't do them a lot of favors. They can work on their personality to get that in check a little bit. That doesn't make them a 0, but it becomes more balanced. So it is fluid over time. And the second thing is that number by itself is not an absolute. So you could make the argument that compassion is a subset of the personality trait agreeableness. And let's say you score 50 on that. That means that if you walk into a room with 100 people, 50 people are more agreeable than you are. You could say that 50 then kind of is like your baseline. But if you aim your attention to a loved one, your compassion might be, for example, 70. But if you aim your compassion at somebody who you meet on the street who you don't know, your compassion might be, 30. So there might be a plus 20 and a minus 20 relative to that baseline that you have. So it is not a fixed number that is telling everything. It's like the midpoint of a range that exists, and that range you can operate within that range pretty much in your temperament.
I don't know if that's useful because I think that well, okay, so two things to that. We're totally off topic, but that's okay. This is the kind of people Peterson Academy has attracted, you guys. Okay. So two things I'll say to that. Two things I'll say to that. One, while Big Five, yes, you can work on your more extreme traits to become a more balanced person who has an easier time of it in the world and a generally better experience, for yourself and others. But the data is apparently quite clear that like you can test somebody when they're a child, and more or less that profile is going to be their profile as an adult. Like it's very biologically determined and heritable. So, if you have high openness parents and grandparents, you are likely to be high in openness. High neuroticism, you're likely to be high neuroticism. There's actually a very strong genetic component. Another thing I'll say is that it's self-report. So it's, I think sometimes when people's scores change, it might be that their perception of themselves has changed. You're right. Sometimes you do develop and change, but and then the thing you just said about, well, it's context. I still think just the set point, like because the questions account for different situations already. The self-report inventory, right? So it'll say when you're dealing with your family, this X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, or when you're dealing with the public, A, B, C, D. So I think a diversity of social context is already included in the self-report inventory. So I think the average score is more useful than saying, well, but I'm agreeable with this person, but disagreeable with this person. That's just my take as a nerd. This is Peterson Academy's demographic, guys. The expelled ones, anyway.
Yeah, but it's a very valid point. You can ask yourself the question, okay, if you score 50 and you are, what's the point then in knowing that you are 70 towards this person and 30 towards that person? It doesn't tell you much. I agree with you. So these scores by themselves. So you can do what's the website, the website where you can do this score?
Understand me or yourself.
Understandmyself.com.
Understandmyself.com. Yeah, so you can.
Jordan Peterson.
It's a plug for Jordan Peterson. That's right.
Understandmyself.com.
Yeah.
You can go to that website and then you can do the assessment, and it depends on. Well, in my case, it lasted like 20 minutes. My wife also did it. She took like a little bit over an hour. So yeah, I guess that's kind of the range. But you get like a report afterwards, and the report will not just give you the numbers; it will tell you exactly what it means and how you should interpret it. So yeah, I agree with you, Dusty. I think the text that goes with that grade that you're getting is very useful. It's not very useful to know that you score 30 towards this person and 70 towards that person. That's a perfectly valid thing to put forward.
It might mean that they're a psychopath too. You learn that somebody's a psychopath, you give them a little bit less compassion. Better watch out.
Yeah.
So I'll just throw in there, just to try and kind of bring it, a couple of things. One, I wonder if knowing that people operate within a range is useful, just because my impression is that the Big Five differs from other personality type things because it's more behavior versus cognition. And
Hmm.
like, so there's that side of it. And maybe it's more useful knowing that there is that range just because you are going to it like it's less horoscopy, if you know what I mean. Like you're not going to say, oh well, I am these four letters, therefore. It's more like, hey, I know that given my personality, I probably operate roughly around this range, but I can
Right.
make steps
Yeah.
to change that.
Yes, it's
So
more
it's
Mhm.
diverse.
less, yeah, it's less putting people, I think, in a box. Um, and
Mhm.
then, phew, um, and then just kind of to jump off that, if I may, and if we need to change gears or anything, let me know. But I think to bring it back to our kind of expectations of the Peterson Academy social side, um, the discussions, kind of like Dusty wasn't afraid to jump in there and throw in her 2 cents about that and stuff, which is cool. Like I feel like I've got a better idea of Big Five stuff now. That was kind of the really neat thing about everything on Peterson Academy Social is that we had discussions on some of the craziest topics. Like I had so much fun because it was like anything from theology to art to literature to politics to all the things you weren't supposed to talk about. It was a really cool
Mhm.
group of people who were, on the whole, largely quite emotionally intelligent enough, like not to be offended if their views got challenged. And so
Hmm.
it was really neat to see people who were perhaps in some cases a little more bent towards disagreeableness or who just had a different opinion they wanted to share. People would get in there and really hash stuff out, and it was really cool because it didn't, like, you weren't judged for doing that, and or at least I didn't feel judged for doing that. And it was neat because there was kind of that free exchange of ideas, so we got to play with a lot of theories together and people could draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, so I'm gonna steal a little bit of a quote that Jordan Peterson made on his last podcast on CEO of the Diary of a CEO. So what he said is, judging is good, and I think we were all judged by everybody, but we were not being condemned. That was a good
Hmm.
thing. We were all being very.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I noticed also as well. What you're saying, Frankie. There could be all kinds of different opinions about all kinds of different topics, and they might be discussions about the most divisive topics you can think of that are playing out in the world right now. But on the Peterson Academy, somehow we managed to be very self-corrective and have those discussions in a very organized and uplifting way. So people were not personally attacked. If
Hmm.
somebody gave an opinion that was genuinely an opinion, the people, they were generally also open to hearing other opinions, but not just that. It wasn't met with condemnation. It was met with, hey, have you looked at it from this perspective? And hey, how about this? And hey, what you're saying over there, it makes a little bit sense, but what you're saying in the next sentence, not so much. And this is why I think that. And that's how those discussions all went. I
Yeah.
think it will be very fair to say that within the first couple of months, aside from some anomalies that happened, um, in the first couple of months, that was exclusively the case almost.
Yeah. And I would also say that, yeah, we definitely attacked ideas, not people. And people who started to attack people, like when it started to get that vibe, they developed kind of a reputation for being trolls. Like, I just think everybody understood them that they were kind of the trolls of the community. But it was interesting, I think, because we so valued diversity and we so badly didn't want to become the kind of echo chamber we despised on the radical left, right? And like disclaimer, I was always kind of a centrist left leaning, like a left leaning centrist before the world went crazy. So I don't have like a low view of like liberal ideas, just like putting that out there. But like the craziness on like the fringes of the left, none of us wanted to be that. So I think we liked the diversity when we found it, and we even I think tried really hard to um kind of like bring teach or educate or reform the trolls. Like we wanted their disagreeableness. We didn't want to like kick them out for but then they would go too far and just be attacking people. I even noticed that it was actually quite funny to me. If somebody said, I'm actually a leftist, we were like, oh boy, we got one. Like it's almost like it was almost embarrassing. We were like, no, no, please be here and argue with us.
Yeah, one guy in particular actually made a post. He was like, "Man, I don't know if I feel comfortable being on this platform because I feel like there are a lot of people who tend to lean more conservative." And like I think we all flocked to his post and we were like, "No, please stay. Like we
We
absolutely
got
need you."
one. Somebody who doesn't agree with like the political stuff because we had a really broad diversity of opinions for theology, for
Hmm.
philosophy, for psychology, legal
Mhm.
matters, all this stuff. But when it came to like, current events and politics, it definitely was a lot more unified. Like the platform was predominantly the current 2025 January 2025 definition of right leaning and conservative, whatever that is, what I'd say was the majority of the people there when it comes to like current events and politics. The majority, is that fair?
Probably, yeah, probably like centrist with
Centrist.
a leaning towards a bit more of the right-leaning stuff just simply because of how crazy the more left-leaning politics has become.
Yeah. Do you think it's less centrist now and more far right? That's an open
That's hard to
question that
say.
just popped into my head. I wonder if there's been a shift in demographic. Jeffrey might know as time goes on because he is not expelled.
No,
Yeah.
I am not. I actually behaved. I didn't do any crimes, so I'm still
Right.
I'm still there. Yeah,
New wrong think on the Jeffrey Van surname I can't pronounce podcast. Yeah.
yeah. We'll see what happens after this podcast. But no, honestly, I don't pay much attention to that at all. So I'm not the guy that you should ask the question to. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, what he's saying is he's too busy.
What he's saying is he has a life.
He is alive.
Mm. Yeah, I'm way more interested in the ideas and the connecting with people, and that was also was really beautiful about this first couple of months. Well, actually, until like the end of last year, in my personal opinion, December was also a beautiful month. It was the idea that everybody was sharing their experiences. It was such an amazing thing to see because for a reason that I can't really properly articulate, the Peterson Academy and the social environment allowed people to really open themselves up. And this podcast, 100%, is a result of that because every single person that came onto the podcast so far has been a student telling their story just because they want to and just because they feel safe to do so. And all these conversations that we had on the platform, we were talking about very sensitive things. The conversation that went on were about, what do you think it means to be saved in the Christian sense, right?
Mm,
That's a very, very well, sensitive and very personal question to ask people because you're literally asking people what they think their faith is. That's not something that you can just bring forward any place. And there's like a bunch more of those kind of examples. What it means to be faithful to a partner. Is it wrong to do certain things? What is the moral effect of taking a certain action in a certain way? All those sorts of things, and that was really beautiful to see people coming together and really discussing all kinds of different things without condemnation.
I think you touched on something there, Jeffrey, that's kind of a part of why it was that way, which is people felt safe. We were all behind a relatively decent paywall, and people just naturally, the more we spent time with one another and the less we were met with condemnation for our ideas, the more I think we all trusted each other. And it turned into this strangely, like, it was this weird, like, renaissance of, like, centrist creativity almost. Uh,
yeah.
like, I don't know if you had something else you wanted to add there, Dusty, before I kind of throw out some of the cultural stuff that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna just add, it wasn't just personal, like deep and personal philosophical ideas. Like quite a few of us, um, also shared really personal life experiences. Like you had people like, Mara was on your podcast talking about some of her experiences with her father, right? And like in his passing. And I would be on there and be like, guys, I'm still grieving the death of my sister. And I'd feel safe to post a poem that I wrote in my, as part of grieving my sister. Um, and I wasn't met with lots of trolls and this and that. And, I could say, guys, a month would go by and it would be like, all right, this upward thing, like I'm doing better right now. And next I'm going to get my book published. And somebody else is like, and Mara, I'm going to get my album published. And then Frankie's like, I am an entrepreneur. That is who I am. And I got this because she's brilliant. Right. And you got this kind of people saying, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And it was a fantastic, yeah, it was deeply curious. And our intellectual discussions, we're still learning, and so people would be following the same course, and then they would tie in those ideas and be hashing it out, trying to understand what it meant. So we were also growing. Like maybe sometimes what we said was a little bit trite, or we didn't say it concisely enough, but it was a learning environment. Yeah, and people felt so safe. I just thought it was really wonderful.
There was room to make mistakes and there was grace for it. Like if people maybe said something in a way that wasn't quite the way that they meant it, or even just shared something in particular that might not have resonated with the group as much, like it wasn't met with judgment and there was room. I think people knew that they were free to make mistakes and keep going. Can I add a couple of points here real quick?
Yeah,
That
go ahead,
before we...
please.
Okay. So one of the things that was really neat was it started to take on kind of a culture of its own. Like it became its own thing, which was really neat. Like, one of the guys, Trond, who I think is from like Scandinavia or something, like he started this thing pretty early on. I want to say like September, October. That was Poetry Sunday. And like he started this really cool thing that he called Poetry Sunday, and a bunch of people jumped on the bandwagon, and every Sunday people would either post an original poem that they had written or reference one of their favorite poems. And that was something like we all started looking forward to that. And then like somebody else started Bob Ross Monday, and so we started people started posting their art or artwork that they enjoyed. So we were exposed to like all this cool stuff that like either students were making or they liked, that like I learned of artists I didn't even know existed, just from people sharing stuff. So there was like that aspect of it as well.
Pendragon.
Oh yeah, there was an essay society that sprang up where people would watch the same class over a 1.5, 2 week period and then write an essay and submit it. And it was all student volunteers who took on the position of grading those essays based on, I think they were the metrics that Dr. Peterson had on the essay app. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. Because I was one of the graders for that. And man, we put a lot of work into it. Like everybody, the essays, people put a lot of work into them. They took them very seriously. And those of us who volunteered to, mark them against the rubric, we took it really seriously. Like I had spreadsheets, and like other people were like, yes, we need spreadsheets. And then like people were so and can I just add a point about that? We wanted more academic features, and so we just started creating them ourselves, right? Like we weren't there just to hang out. And I think things like that, and even the poetry and the art, like we really wanted to be productive and for it to be more of a university. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, somebody started a book club, even like new things were happening all the time. And I felt like I was back in college because I was up till all hours of the night finishing my essay on time in between like travel and other obligations I had in my real life. Um, and yeah, there was definitely a culture of camaraderie and stuff. I would say, just to wrap all of it up in summary, it was very much the symbolically, it was a lot like how Dr. Peterson describes the Garden of Eden in a marriage relationship, is like it was a bunch of people all together in a spirit of mutual play aiming upwards, and that was a really cool thing to see
For the most part.
for the most part. Well, there are always monsters on the fringes of the map, right? And we welcome those too.
Yeah, and speaking about the monsters on the fringes of the map, so I think the point that you both laid out is a very good one to understand. So especially to quote you, Dusty, from what you said just like a minute ago, a lot of the academic features that were missing, the students created them themselves.
Yes.
And the essay society is a very good example of that. And people took a lot of joy in that. There was a lot of effort into it, and there was a group of people. It's a relatively small group of people in the grand scheme of things, because I believe that in the beginning, when Peterson Academy just launched, so within a month or something like that, I believe the number was like between 20 and 25,000 people signed up. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less, but around that number signed up to the Peterson Academy. And well, my gut feeling tells me that around maybe 100, 150, something like that, were active on the social environment, and that lasted for a couple of months. So there was a very, well, with that big number in mind, there was a very small minority that was active on the social environment, and those people led, and that includes both of you. Those people led very productive enterprises in order to push the the whole social platform and everybody in it forward quite a bit. Years of year at least a couple of years when you're talking about strictly the technology that is available within the Peterson Academy. Stuff like dark messaging, stuff like creating essays and having a shared dedicated review mechanism within the platform in order to facilitate that. That didn't exist. So that was very beautiful and very productive to see, and I believe the entire community on the platform definitely reaped the fruits from that. Yeah. So with that in mind, because you mentioned the monsters at the fringes of the garden, there were a couple of anomalies within the, well, I think between, let's say, August when it launched and December, the end of December, there were I believe two or three anomalies. And by anomalies, I mean, for example, I remember a guy called Kevin who was writing. Well, I didn't really follow Kevin, but I do know his name, and I believe Dusty or Frankie, is one of you familiar with his specific case?
Yeah. Yeah, so Kevin was the first one who kind of was misbehaving to a point where people were noticing.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of a tirade of all caps about things that were like pseudo philosophical. But then he started to kind of bend those towards like actually attacking other members of the platform. And so it was a really interesting moment because it was the first time that the group had ever dealt with something like that. And
This was like a month in or something like that, right? Maybe 1.5 month.
yeah, I think I
Hmm.
want to say it was like September,
September.
October. Yeah. Yeah, I think it
Okay.
was
Okay.
mid to late September. And so it might have been Labor Day weekend. Anyway, whatever the case. Um, it was it was the way that people decided to handle it first was to try and reason with him. Like everybody who was around and available jumped in, and instead of slapping him back, anything like that, people were like, hey, maybe you're not understanding this properly. Like, I remember I had some extra time that day, and I think I spent probably half an hour or more just writing a really thoughtful response to one of his posts just to try to reason with him and get through to him that he maybe might not be perceiving this properly. And then I think there might have been other people kind of trying to help with damage control, like when there were comments on other people's posts that were more in the uh, more personal attack sort of way, that people would jump in there and just be like, no, this isn't actually don't this isn't Peterson Academy. This is not our typical people. So like don't pay so much attention, that kind of thing. And
Right.
once
Yeah.
people started to realize that he couldn't be reasoned with, um, and he was attacking other students verbally and stuff, and there was a lot of profanity and stuff going on there. Um, I think enough people reported him that maybe I think it was at least 2 days before he was actually removed from the platform.
So 2 days from the start, from when this situation started until the moment that he was banned.
Yeah, and he had been allowed, like he had posted stuff that was kind of off the wall before. He posted stuff about like weed and some other things and pictures of himself and stuff. And like when it was only a little crazy, people mostly just didn't engage and just ignored it. It was not until he started to actually go after other students that people were like, okay, this needs to stop. Let's try reasoning with you first. And in place of that, if that doesn't work, okay, now it's time to actually report you right to support something because something needs to be done.
Can I jump in on this? So
Please.
I would like to highlight that the community was very much self-moderating. So while we were waiting for continued developments on the site, we very much built our community. We took ownership of it. We took charge of our educations, and we led in moderating the platform, right? Like trying to reform people, trying to bring reconciliation, trying to keep the tone from becoming inflammatory or abusive. And then when things got really bad, that's when the users would start reporting and bringing stuff to the administrator's attention. I'd also like to point out that because we were largely self-moderating, that's going to lead into the fact that there was no actual code of conduct, which was something that was promised to us pretty early on and was always supposed to be part of it. There were no clear rules, so it's a bit of a Wild West, and that's great if everybody's going to behave well. But when people start being removed, then it gets into a little bit of a gray area. One example I'd like to bring up is that All Caps Kevin is not actually the first person who got banned. I believe the first person who got banned was somebody who signed up to take the courses, but also out of curiosity as a journalist, as like a journalistic endeavor. And so
Right.
I believe there was a journalist who came and was open and honest in the social feed. I wasn't there for that. I heard about it later. I'd read his article. But he was open and honest, like, hey, I'm here. I want to see what all this is about. Everybody kind of knows he doesn't really like Jordan Peterson or like the people, but he's curious and he's like, anybody want to talk to me about what this place means to you? And he was banned without any clear violation of any code of conduct, right? And that was included in the article. And there was differing opinions in the community about that, right? So you had people in the community who thought, well, he's not here in good faith if this is a journalist who doesn't agree with us. And you can tell by my tone, I have a problem with that view, right? Like I'm putting my cards out on the table here. I don't have anything to hide. I have a problem with that. I think that if this is a university and we're going to say we're devoid of ideology, then why not allow us to be adults? And if we want to talk to this person, let us talk to this person.
Right.
And if he wants to say bad things about us because that's his opinion, let's be who we say we are and allow that freedom of speech. I don't see a clear violation of a code of conduct in posting on the social feed to say, does anybody want to talk to me? I'm a student, I am watching the courses, but I am also, like a journalist.
So one quick question over there, because the only thing that comes to mind is there might be some context that we do not know. So maybe that person reached out to maybe that person has the history with the Petersons, so the Petersons already knew him or something like that, or he reached out with in a way that we didn't see.
That's exactly the point. Then it's personal and it's not a violation of a code of conduct. Right now it's a personal decision of, well, this person has a history with us, so we're going to ban him.
Yeah,
So
fair.
so to me, if that is the case, that's even more problematic. Is this like
Fair.
there's a personal history, and if there's somebody who has because if you look at the world right now, our politics and elections almost take place on X. Like they're taking place on new Twitter with its horrible black aesthetic. Um, and so, well, so that means that there's a crazy blurred line between personal disagreement and like political or business disagreement. Like the lines are so blurred. It's like so mad. And so if you say, well, it's personal, there's like a history. It's like, well, what kind of personal history? Like, is this they had like an X war, like a Twitter war, or is this like I don't know. And so I would just say that early on there were users, and I agreed with them, who thought that was interesting.
Just let people make up their own minds.
Yeah, like we're adults, aren't we? And why can't he say bad things about us? Like that's my thing. Like why can't he say bad things?
If the caliber of students that they're churning out is actually of good repute, then eventually he will be misproven disproven anyway.
Well, and it would say something if we welcomed his criticism. If we welcomed his scrutiny, it would say something about us actually being liberally minded.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that post, and so I'm not sure. I read the article. I don't remember the person at all.
I do remember. I do remember some concern because one of the concerns, I believe it came forward a couple of times, was if we have a journalist over here who might or might not be acting in bad faith. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But the primary concern that came forward is if this is an environment where we post stuff that is sensitive and personal and genuine about ourselves, that stuff might be copy and pasted for the world to see, especially because people also use their own pictures. So their faces were on there, their full names were on there. So they didn't want to be published on the
Right.
internet for
But then
everybody to
that should be
see.
in a code. But then there should be something like, what's the line then? Like, it is against the terms of use to discuss, like, what happens in Fight Club stays in the first rule of Fight Club. Nobody talks about Fight Club, right? What happens in Vegas
Right.
stays in Vegas.
Right.
Like, is that the rule?
Mm.
Because Peterson Academy itself, I believe, was publishing memes and posts that students had put on Peterson Academy social, and they were using it in their marketing. So, like, where's the line? Right. So I'm just saying, you've already heard me gush about Peterson Academy, but that to me is like an early sign for me that there's something
Fair.
that doesn't line. And then there was Brian, who I kind of want to touch on him briefly. Brian,
Was he the third one?
yeah. Brian was relatively like he was a smart dude. When he was good, he was good. When he was bad, he was awful. You know, just like not a stable person. Kind of spammed the feed. Some of his posts were really engaging. I actually kind of missed him when he was gone, but me personally, he harassed really badly. I know that there were people reported him multiple times because I'm argumentative, and he had a tendency to verge into personal attack in a time where I was still grieving the death of my sister. So I ended up having to write to admin and be like, I need help because this guy is really not like I'm asking him, please leave me alone, and he's just spamming me with insults, you know. Um, and they actually just blocked him. Like, I mean, they banned him because we didn't have a block feature. And I actually felt a little bad. I was relieved, but also felt kind of bad because he was kind of like like the psycho cousin in the family is how it felt. Like this is the psycho cousin's now out of the family, and people in the community felt weird about it. And then I felt weird that they felt weird because I was like, this person was like being abusive. But then the underlying thing that people kept on saying was, well, but he didn't. There was no code of conduct for him to violate. So this means they can just throw us out on a whim. And I was like, well, I didn't ask for him to be banned. I asked for help. Like I was kind of hoping for a block feature or that they would give him a talking to, just get him to stop. Um, so I felt really conflicted about that. Um,
I felt. Did you have more? I don't want to cut you off there, Dusty, but
I talk too much as it is, Frankie. Over to you.
well, I think we both do. Um, no, it's one of those things where I also felt conflicted, and I'm pretty sure, whereas like all caps Kevin definitely crossed the line, and I did report him because it got to a point where he was not seeing reason and it was problematic for other students. I actually personally made a decision not to report Brian because he had been personally attacking me, and for the most part I thought it was in good fun, and even when he was kind of being mean, like it doesn't bother me when people attack me usually, like it was fine.
I don't like it. I don't like being told that I'm like pathetic and useless and like I'm like, you need to leave me alone because I can't punch you and someone needs to punch you in the face
Yeah.
right now.
And I think you were getting a different kind of it. Like I felt like anytime Brian and I went back and forth, which wasn't a lot, I tried usually not to engage with him too much. And originally I kind of took the same approach of trying to engage with him in good faith. Like, hey, here's why your post didn't
Yeah.
land and why some people are upset about it. Like, just in case you don't see this, let me like try and explain it to you just in case that's something you don't see. Um, and like I really wanted the best for him. And when he did kind of more come at me personally, that was when I was like, okay, well, now it's kind of more personal and I don't want to like lash out on my, like because of that. So if other people deem this inappropriate behavior, I'll let them report him, but I'm just going to leave things as they are. And so I don't know, like that's
Well, so I would just add to this because I want to be clear. I think he was actually, I think he had a sadistic temperament. Like I think he enjoyed upsetting people. And people saw that pattern. So I'm not saying that it's, I think Peterson Academy social is better without him because he couldn't be managed. But I do agree that people had a reason to be like, well, what was he to ask, was he given warnings? Is it best to go straight to banning someone from the platform who has been part of the fabric, or would it be better to put a rush on a block feature? I think they were worthwhile questions in terms of what kind of culture and what is the relationship between this online university community and the people running it? Like, is this staff? Is this like university administration enrolled students? Is this like private business customers they want to kick out of their store? Like, what is the relationship here? Because we were building a community, and there wasn't a, it'd be good maybe for you to talk about the interaction that administration did have on PA Social, but I'd say they weren't part of the fabric, so it was confusing.
Yeah, so maybe the one you already mentioned it quite quickly in your story, Dusty. But one thing that I believe is absolutely crucial to understand within this context. So the context right now is that you have a couple of months time period where people are really productive and engaging with each other in a very up-aiming sort of way. And there were a couple of anomalies, and we discussed Kevin and Brian just now. What is absolutely crucial to consider is that there was no block feature whatsoever. So when Dusty was telling the story about being harassed by Brian and telling him to stop, demanding him to stop. There was nothing Dusty could do to ignore that except for not go to the platform anymore. That is
Mm-hmm.
that's very good. That's very important to consider, especially because this was also the time where the tagging came in. So tagging is when you place an ad and you place the name of the person, that person gets tagged pretty much. And you get a notification as the user. So in this case, the problem that Dusty would be facing is not just getting messages in a certain environment where
Yeah.
that she could just make the decision not to go there. The text would actually show up in her notifications. So whenever she opens up her notifications, she sees a whole list of messages that came in, which drown out the other, well, let's call them legitimate messages from other students. That is absolutely crucial to understand in this case, because that means that there is nothing in this specific situation that Dusty can do to prevent being harassed by a certain personality without asking the administration for help or
Yeah.
not go to the platform at all. That is
Yeah.
crucial to understand.
Yeah. And notifications show up. So for people who aren't familiar with Peterson Academy, the social feed and notifications are like a frame on every page. So if you're in your studies, you get the notification. Actually, a few of us asked, like, could that be removed so we can focus on our studies and it not be like one thing? But that's just how it is. So it's kind of like meta. Like actually, even the aesthetic is a little bit like Facebook, I would say, that they patterned it after. Um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, you get the notification. It was this red dot all the time, and yeah, I found it very stressful. I would have really appreciated an ability to block him, or but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the second thing maybe, because this was we've already outlined the different perspectives on this, but this was a very divisive issue. The
It
the question,
was.
should he be banned or not? That answer was not black or white.
No.
But it is good to know also for context that situation with Kevin, who was, blandly attacking people, that lasted 2 days, before from the moment that he started to the moment that he was banned. Brian was on for way longer, and I'm not sure if I got the timeline correct, but at least for a month or two.
More than 1 month for sure. And lots of people had trouble with them. And lots of people were upset. I know from people talking to me, like I was reporting him, like he wouldn't stop this thing. I was reporting him, he wouldn't stop. And like admin didn't seem to have a problem with that. Um, which the reason the reason that confuses me, and I have this look on my face, is like, so again, it's just that thing of like, so what are the rules for this? Is it a university? Is it a business where you kick people out who are making like what? It is confusing.
It's very good to know that people cannot block each other,
Hmm.
which means personal attacks can happen and can almost not be ignored. That's something that needs to be realized. And
Hmm.
another thing that needs to be realized is that the administration was very careful with banning. So the situation with Brian in this case, who in my
Hmm.
opinion went very far on many
Very fair.
occasions, it lasted for months.
Hmm.
And that was just one person. That was one person doing quite a bit and not getting banned. So getting the benefit of the doubt for at least a couple of months. That's also very good to understand because I'm skipping a little bit ahead and let's not go there yet. But the bans that
Yes.
happened later were way more rapid. So that's the
Very
contrast.
fast.
Yeah, so let's leave it
Very
for now as it is, but
fast.
that's good to realize that point. It lasted a couple of months. Yeah. Frankie, did you have anything that you want to add?
So, and like my original, just to put a little extra context in there, my original take on Brian was okay, just like Kevin, let's try and reason with him first. When his stuff started to get so over the top and people were very clearly agitated to the point that I was picking up on it, it got to a point where, um, like I did sort of, so I had tried reason, that didn't work. So I tried a kind of tit for tat sort of approach and kind of push back on him a little bit. And when that didn't work, I tried ridicule. I was like, well, I mean, everybody sees this. Let's just call it out. And like, is this going to work?
Frankie's nickname is the Queen of Meme for those watching. The Queen of Meme. She discovered that she had an untapped ability to generate very amusing memes that resonated with people. And she may or may not have used this ability against the unruly Brian.
Well, uh, and I did, um, like I really hesitated on that. I really did because when I started doing the memes, I was like, well, some people can use these and they're mean and like I don't want to use these unnecessarily like towards people. I don't want to use them to, you know, like I don't want them to all be about me. I want to be really careful about how I do this. And uh,
Which was the spirit, aim your attack at the idea, not at the person.
yes. And eventually, like the day that I think it was actually the day that Brian got banned, he had just gotten so unruly that
Mm.
I put one out there that it was directed at him particularly because enough people had told him, Brian, you gotta, you gotta slow down. And it was like, all right, well, if I can't help Brian, I can at least provide some comic relief to these people who have been harassed by him for ages. And it landed and it did what it needed to. And I felt a little bad about it, but it was like, well, I mean, we tried to warn him, so
Yeah.
there's some extra context if that helps.
Yeah. I think Jeffrey's point is good though about from an administrative standpoint. We have three different responses like in protocols for banning, right? You've got the this is a journalist, bad, ban. Then you've got all caps, 2 days of harassment, gone. And then you have Brian, lots of reports, but the idea I think was, well, but we're not the kind of people who just ban people. And so even though there was a lot of like trolling and harassment taking place, maybe in kind of a blender with some other stuff as well because he wasn't an idiot. But they're like, well, we don't want to be those kind of people, so we're gonna. It went on that he had lots of time, and I think that was Jeffrey's. That's important. I think that he had lots of time.
Mhm. So before we move ahead, now in hindsight, so if you think about the situation with Brian specifically, let's look at that moment. What is your opinion on that right now and how it was handled?
I think that you know, we're now up to at that point probably at least 30,000 students. You know, uh, $500 a piece. Maybe prioritize making a block feature. That's yeah, and maybe post something publicly to tell them like you need to stop or you will be banned, or like make something clear to the maybe put out the code of conduct then. I was
Mhm.
grateful to be protected. My lighting is going weird. I was grateful to be protected. And I was relieved, but even then I felt uncomfortable, and I still feel that um, the people who criticized the way that was handled were probably correct about banning without other steps.
Frankie, what do you think?
Yeah, by the time he got banned, I mostly was relieved, and I also was like, no, no, this place runs under the ethos of Dr. Peterson. Like, all of you guys who are criticizing this are just being silly and paranoid. Nothing's ever going to happen to random people, especially people who are of much better repute on the social, like, I just dismissed the people who were saying that it wasn't a good move. I was like, well, I feel bad that he got removed, but it seemed. But I'm more relieved that we can now go back to, because for a while, like everybody's attention was kind of diverted to Brian and trying to mitigate that situation. And so some of the productivity and the creativity had kind of slumped a little bit. And I think by that point, everybody was a little weary of the situation. And so it was like, okay, I'm relieved. And all of you people who are saying this, like I never would have said that to them, but just kind of in my head, I was like, well, everybody who's saying that this sets a bad precedent, like surely it would never go that far.
I told them to their face, but I was like, I'm glad he's gone because I was being harassed. But I still agree that it was a bad precedent. So I'm conflicted.
Well, two things can be true at once, right?
I must say, honestly, I was quite happy that it was gone. I think it was a lot better like that. It
It
was
was
obvious.
better.
Yeah, it was obvious trolling. Like almost everybody exclusively was very upset. It was not a good thing. But anyway, so to recap everything, because I think that's a good moment to move on to the big question of this conversation. To recap, open enrollment became possible in July 2024. The Peterson Academy opened its digital doors in August 2024. And then all the way until December 2024, we had a situation where the general attitude within the community was upwards aimed. They were productive. They
Mhm.
were discussing all kinds of ideas in a very good and productive way. It was a good way to learn. This podcast, once again, is an example what came out of that and the conversations that were had. But Frankie, you bringing the light touch of your comedy and your memes to the table, and Dusty, I remember you bringing your art to the table. Those are very good examples of stuff that came out of that community. Within that time frame, there were a couple of anomalies. One lasted quite long, but in the end, every single one of them was the conclusion with every single one of them was relief that we went back to the status quo. Especially with Brian, I remember this went on for at least a couple of days. There were a lot of people posting a lot of different memes. I
Yes,
remember even Mikhaila, Jordan Peterson's daughter, who was the CEO of the platform, joined in on the fun, with like these
she
laughing
did.
smileys. Yeah, so that's it was like the way that the community just recovered and just went back to the status quo. And then the new year came, and I think that's a good moment to ask you the question: um, did you at this point already notice a shift in the atmosphere on the community? Or would you say that would come later in January 25? So my question, to rephrase it just again, but just a little bit, when did for you the atmosphere change?
Who wants to go first?
I can go first. Um, just because I haven't, yeah. I would say probably very shortly after the new year, January 25, for me. Like to give you an idea, because this seemed like such a worthwhile endeavor. Like I wanted to see it succeed so much. So I put a ton of time into it. Like, and I am self-employed, I'm a consultant, and I decided that it was worth it to forego developing some sides on my business to go towards building up Peterson Academy, because I was like, this is such a bigger endeavor and it's so neat and it has the potential to be such an amazing provision for so many people that So like I spent a lot of time on it, and just to give you an idea, that will illustrate that I think it changed very shortly after the new year is is that I spent New Year's Eve writing because Mikhaila had I think it was New Year's Eve or the day before, she had posted something about, hey, maybe we can share our New Year's goals. And so I actually spent like the whole evening New Year's Eve, I actually like just writing my goals for the year. I
Mhm.
spent time like it was just quiet time with my journal. And probably the Peterson Academy feed right in front of me just to watch what other people were saying. Uh, if I'm being realistic, just looking at
Mhm.
everything and going, okay, well, what would I like to do in the new year? And whether that's related to Peterson Academy or my business that I'm still working on, or, you know, any of a number of things. And I posted it on the platform, I think shortly after midnight, actually. Um, but it was still, at least for me at that point, I still thought it was basically the same thing because I was sharing like, yeah, fairly personal stuff. Hey, this is my upward aim for the whole next year, guys. I'm putting this out there to try and help inspire others to do the same.
Okay, so I felt the vibe shift a little earlier. Um, being higher in neuroticism. I'm
Yeah,
more emotional. I'm more emotional and I'm yeah, you know, if you've seen my podcast with Jeffrey, like I'm a people watcher in like a different kind of way. And I had noticed that there were users who were expressing things like discontent at the positivity of the platform, like kind of really hidden in the comments. There were people who were like there was the one user who we all realized was plagiarizing artwork and had a fake face and a fake name and everything, right? Who was like this getting just milking the praise and the accolades of the community, and then we found out that actually they were just it was completely plagiarized. That person never got banned, by the way. um, Even though they asked to be banned and refunded, they were just allowed to keep doing their thing. But nestled in comments, there were users who were doing things like talking to that person, being like, "Oh, I really like admire your deceit," and this place is too positive, and I wish there were two Peterson Academy platforms where these socially skilled,
Mhm.
positive, extroverted people don't have the dominance, like weird stuff. And I was seeing a lot of that just scanning through conversations, and I was also experiencing weird things like um, me pushing back against viewpoints that I disagreed with, which is very common for me, as you can probably tell, like super opinionated, like to talk. But I was getting way more aggressive feedback, and it was becoming more manipulative from some users who were kind of like one person went on a rampage and called me a troll lying in wait for them because I disagreed with one of their posts. They were like, "You've been waiting to attack me," and I was like, but I was getting bits of that from multiple directions, and it started to feel like people who were doing stuff like that were like starting to, I don't know, there was discontent. So what I'm saying is there was discontent, but it wasn't it was weird. And it was one of the reasons why it would have been good to have like, you know, block features, like let people maybe have some space from each other. Um, Maybe we need some forums where, the people who are really frustrated with our positivity, because fair enough, maybe they hang out in a different forum or something. Or like so I think as things get larger, it's harder to have that kind of happy, optimistic, we're all self-managing, we all get along, like kumbaya. I don't know if that's realistic for an endeavor that is really truly diverse and growing. So I felt that there was discontent in the community. I didn't
Well,
want it to become
it's not
negative.
it's not unrealistic to say that even though you have people with a shared vision and with a shared goal, it is not unfair to say that you need to have some form of rules in place.
Yes.
You know, you don't need like three book three books worth of rules, that are impossible to get through, like pretty much every terms of condition from any product that you use. It shouldn't be there. But even if it's just like 3 or 4 or 5, like golden rules, the guiding golden rules of Peterson Academy, that we
Yeah.
all know that if you break those, there will be consequences for that. It might not have to mean that you are getting thrown off. It might mean anything. We can think about what might happen, if you want to work with a strike system or whatever. But you need to have something in place. You can't just expect 40,000 students, or between 30 and 40,000 students, to until eternity self-manage. It works in the beginning when everybody's enthusiastic.
Right.
Once the bad actors or the people that don't act upon good faith come in, and they will come in because they can come in, you need to have something in place to defend yourself against that. And there was no block feature. So once again, that example that you just made, Dusty, there was nothing you could do from those against those notifications coming in. You need to have something in place, and now there was nothing. The only thing you can do was report the person, and then hope that the administration will take an action against that person. There was no other mechanic.
I want to be clear. I didn't report any of those people, like that vibe shift. They're just expressing their opinions. Like call me a troll and be angry at me. That's no problem. You would just ask about like a vibe shift. And so what I'm
Yeah.
explaining is I could tell that some of the community was feeling like, well, their vision wasn't coming to pass for the social feed because all these other people already had established these strong connections. And so it was kind of like our vision for the social feed, right? Because we were I was writing a lot of course reflections. Lots of people had, relationships. And so I think there's just feelings, like people had feelings, right? And we don't all get along. And I'm totally cool with that. I would never report people for just like disliking me or arguing with like great vehemence. Like I don't roll that way. But what did concern me was if they insult me and I respond back, some of these people are the kind of people who would report you for just saying, hey, no, or they would, you know what I mean? Like it just wasn't working. And the only reason I'm bringing up that kind of vibe shift that was kind of under the surface is I think that explains why when we come to this next part of the story where the price increases were advertised, and we all started to be like, oh, wait a minute, our subscription isn't locked in. Like we thought our subscription was locked in at the price we secured because it's a subscription. How much is it going up? When we started asking questions, I do feel that some people who already were feeling left out, or I think that they saw it as an opportunity to be like, you're enemies of Peterson Academy. I think that happened. And I think it's because there were feelings. Like there was too many feelings.
Can I add a couple of things here? Cool. One, I guess now that you describe it that way, I can see some of that. Like I was observing it, I just didn't feel threatened by it yet. Like I guess I being lower neuroticism, my threat detection is not where maybe it should be. These are things I'm learning now. But I would say another thing that I think contributed to some of that shift is, which again, like I was just happily posting memes and writing songs and things and not knowing that, yeah, there were snakes in the garden or however you want to put it. And
Same.
like, it was just one of those things that I was like, well, I'm just going to assume that we're still moving on in good faith, and the people who are saying these things, like they'll just kind of catch on as we go. So that was kind of my take on it. But one of the other things I noticed that I think when we get to the next part is going to be incredibly relevant is some of the people who seemed in some way like opposed to some of the stuff we were posting, the things we were posting, some of our disagreements and things, especially some of the more vocal ones, seemed either to be new to Peterson Academy or newly engaging with the social feature. Like,
Do you have an example of that?
Sure. So like a number of them had the Torchbearer early adopter badge, which indicated that they had paid for it prior to the enrollments being open again after
the
that
pre-enrollments. Yeah.
pre-enrollments period. Yes. But some of them we had actually never seen before. in the social area, and others had come and gone, but not really been engaged enough to have built up any sort of rapport. And it seemed like a lot of those people, it did seem the timing, I think a lot of it was just a perfect storm. Like
The
some of them
following
were,
tab too. The trending, sorry. The
yeah,
trending tab.
yeah, like I think that a lot of things that happened were because it seemed like people who may have gotten subscriptions like around Christmas, or people who hadn't had purchased the subscription and hadn't actually used it yet and might have gone, oh, the new year's starting, maybe I should log on. That's my guess. I don't know. Just a lot of new people started to show up right around then. I'm so distracted by Dusty's clearly having something to share. So
I'm laughing because it's mass migration. You're like the open borders. We did not assimilate. They did not assimilate to the Peterson Academy culture. And I just started laughing when I thought of the comparison.
I never would have made that connection, but
Right? They did not assimilate to the culture. Instead, they tried to tear down the culture that had already been established. Yeah,
there
that's
were
really
some
funny.
interesting accusations that were coming towards people who had been there for a long time, and like it just seemed like there were some inferences of like attributions of why people were doing things. Like, oh, well, you're doing this because of this, and it was like, wait a minute, no. Anybody who knows any of us who's been here for the last 4 months knows otherwise. Would
Yeah.
you say that's about right, Dusty?
Yeah. It's just like I said, it gets bigger and we don't have personal spaces yet. And we've been self-managed and people enter and they don't know us. And administration had been supportive of us previously, like Mikhaila, you know, I don't know if she used an LOL, Frankie, when you posted your meme about Brian, but I do remember laughing emojis. Um, and Jordan and Mikhaila both, Jordan Fuller and Mikhaila both, because Jordan Peterson was like not on the platform after the first couple of weeks ever.
Yeah, and
Um,
to be absolutely clear, by the way, Jordan Peterson is her father and Jordan Fuller is her
is
husband.
is her husband, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but those two, like, it was common for us to ask questions about upcoming updates and stuff in the social feed, and for them to comment, either put a post giving us an update on what was coming up, or addressing an issue, or they would comment. So that was our standard form of communication with Mikhaila and her husband, who are running the place. And so, but they weren't part of like the social fabric. So, um, you know, they're my perspective is they are running a business. But I'm still kind of confused. Like I'm still confused about, is it a business or is it a university? And is a university the same thing as a business? And but so yeah, so then when the new people came in who like didn't understand the community, the social fabric that was already established, and not established because this is our, but because we had been there over a period of time and it had developed as things do. They came in, and when they were really upset and saying things about us, it's not like Mikhaila and her husband super knew us well. Like it's not like they'd been reading our posts and the dynamics and how we would encourage each other and how it's not like they could intuit our character and our motives for sharing things. I don't assume that they knew. They may have. I'm just saying I don't assume that they knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they engaged a little bit here and there, but not on a super detailed level.
Yeah, they're like business owners and they've got this beta social platform and they know that people are there and that they're usually not causing too much trouble. And occasionally they hit heart, right? And occasionally they answer a question if they notice something. But I don't think they were like,
Yeah.
I don't think they knew, I don't think it was to them what it was to us. I think there's a disconnect there. To us,
Okay.
it was like, we have become a family. We are so thankful and so thirsty for the knowledge that is coming out of these courses with no grading or anything. Every time I did a course, pretty much, I would write like a reflection with questions and everything else, as well as posting poetry, as well as posting art, as well as commenting on people's things and encouraging them. We were all kind of like that, you know, in our own ways. Um, it it and we felt secure, like we're here at least until the next year, and the next year our subscriptions renew. And yeah, then just after Christmas, dun dun dun, the security vanished.
I think it started with a banner on the front page, and that banner said, um, in, "Renew now before our 20% price increase later in the month, later in January." And also a newsletter will send out to everybody's mail, like, "Hey, be aware of this. Our prices are going up with 20%. So if you want to lock in your current price, you can do
Yeah.
that up to 3 years. Just make sure you do it now." That's it. Nothing more than that.
Yeah. And they're one
So,
lump sum. That's important. It's like
sorry.
a lump, it's a lump sum. It's not like indicate that you are going to stay for 3 years and we'll lock you in at your
Yeah,
subscription. It's like warning, you've got 3 weeks to give us a lump sum of this much. Otherwise,
exactly.
the price goes up 20%,
Yeah.
dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think from that point on forward, I think the summary, and I'm gonna give it, I'm gonna give a very quick summary. So let's flesh this out, and then later on, because I would love to hear what you think about this. But I think the summary is that announcement went out both in mail form and as a banner on the front page, and that triggered a couple of questions to being asked. Just what's all before I actually go to the questions, what's also very good to know is that for as far as we know, no prior communication went out, not in the about this happening, not in the podcast of either Mikhaila and Jordan Peterson. Maybe it was somewhere, so I'm not aware if what I'm saying right now is factually correct. But for as far as we know and for as far as we've researched, there wasn't any prior communication of this happening. So that's good to understand, because that means from our perspective this came out of the blue. But with that context as it be, it raised a couple of questions, and nothing bad, just questions. A question. There were a couple. So for as far as I could tell, there were three types of questions. You had the people that were legitimately concerned about the increase in price, because they didn't have the financial capacity to carry the price increase, pretty much. So for them, that would mean either they couldn't renew, and they would just let their current year of enrollment, expire, um, or they would have to do something in order to make sure that they could renew for the current price, which, like Dusty just laid out, within 3 weeks might be a hard thing to do, but that will be their option. So that was just the financial part. The second thing that happened, the second type of question was more in the sense of, "Hey, you mentioned upfront that there will be a couple of features available, like blocking features, like groups, like, all sorts of different features on
Testing
Peterson
and
Academy."
exams. Testing
Yes,
and
and
exams.
and those aren't there yet. So what's up with that? You're asking more money when the original promise hasn't been delivered yet. That was the second type, and the third type was the communication part. So I believe, and once again, everything I'm laying out right now, please correct me if what I'm saying is wrong. But for as far as I understand it, primarily in the podcast from Jordan Peterson, I believe it was said that they had the goal of making the price as low as possible to make sure that everybody would have the chance in the world to go to the Peterson Academy to get an accreditation and to use that in order to get a better life for themselves and for the loved ones and for the community and everything else around that. Which is a pretty fair statement, because if you look at the average price for like a university, it's probably at least times 10 times 20 of what Peterson Academy is asking for, which is like 500 euros or $500 ish, in our case with a little bit of taxes. But the point is, it's not that much. Um, so that was the statement that they made. At the same time, there was no talks about it increasing over time, and thus again, this came out of the blue. So the third point was more in the sense of, "Hey, you guys told us that it will be a low price in prior conversations, and now there seems to be a shift in communication." Because on one hand, and actually there was another point, because Jordan Peterson, I believe, also said somewhere that um, they had a lot of funding because of the early enrollment that they could be going on for quite a while. But now the statement would be that they need additional funding in order to keep going. That's
Yeah.
like a discrepancy. And people
Yes.
were asking questions like, okay, clearly something changed. You need more funding now, but what changed exactly? What is the thing that makes you that makes you need more funding right now? Which is a very legitimate question to ask. And pretty much all across the board, except for the situation one where it was the financial aspect, the primary thing here was communication. There was either a lack of communication, so we were missing information on certain things, or there were discrepancies in communication. So a thing was being claimed, for example, on a podcast, like we have enough funding, and now all of a sudden there is not enough funding, and there's a lot of why questions coming out of that. So to wrap it up with this, the thing that a lot of people I think were expecting was a statement by the management team of Peterson Academy that would outline why they made the decision to do the price increase of 20%, what led up to that, and also looking in the future, what can you expect as a student, especially in regards to those missing features. Those were it was primarily a communication issue. What is good to know, it was not primarily a financial issue. So it was not that people were angry that they had to pay a little bit extra, $50, I believe, extra per year. That was not the primary issue. It was a communication thing. So let me end with that. Would you say that there's anything wrong in the summary that I have just given?
I would say it depends on the person. So I think what you're saying is correct. Like communication was the biggest issue, and the sort of it's kind of a trust thing because well it was very confusing. Like to me there's this question of what is Peterson Academy? Like I started to be confused about what Peterson Academy was. Is it a university that an online university I've enrolled to where there is no professor interaction, there are no exams or testing, but eventually maybe there will be, hopefully, right? Um, well, is that a university? And is it a university if, um, it's price increases for tuition are not communicated? Like I was confused about what it was. Another part of me is, you know, okay, so it was going to go up 20%, but already at 500 US dollars for the international community, that's a lot more, right? And so to surprise ask for 3 years tuition at 500, and then if not, then it's going to go up 20%. That, Jordan Peterson gave this vision of it being accessible, and I was looking at it saying, well, okay, I need more information before I decide if I'm going to sacrifice, $2,100 Canadian right now to secure 3 years. I need more information. What will it look like in 3 years? Am I paying for more beta stage where I'm not going to have access to like exams and testing? Is this in my best interest? Am I going to end up having to subscribe for 7 years before I get some of the features that are, so I was thinking kind of like that. I also wanted to know, well, if I don't subscribe now, is 20% the final increase? Or by the time my renewal comes, is it going to be 100% increase? Because currently it was at $500 a year before the 20% increase that was about to come. And Mikhaila had said publicly that the goal now is 4,000 for 4 years, which means 1,000. That's a 100% increase. So is it like 20% increase, but then between now and August, it's going to go up to 100%? Because I think we should have that information so that we can decide if it's worth it for us to sacrifice some temporary enjoyment, like maybe I don't get to go on a weekend trip because I have to pay for 3 years now. Because if I don't pay for 3 years now, later it's going to be 1K per year US dollars, which is 1450 Canadian. So now 1450 is nothing for a university education. There is a little bit of a challenge because it is 8 hours of streamed content at this point. Like, so in an age where there is a lot of high quality streaming content out there, I don't want this to sound critical because I think I've already explained how much I love Peterson Academy. But in an age of high quality streaming content, I don't know. I don't know that it is what makes a university then. Is it there's just the reason I'm not articulating this well is because I haven't answered the question, but it was confusing. And when some of us started asking questions, I mean, I actually emailed administration about this first before I ever asked anything publicly on social, by the way. But some of the comments people were saying were like, well, I'm on disability. Well, I live in Mexico. Well, I live in this other third world nation where this is going to cost me so much more than you realize. And I had actually viewed this as like there were all these heartfelt comments, which were not responded to well. So, yes, it's mostly about communication, but I just want to leave room for the fact that, you know what? It's not it's not crass to acknowledge that this business is, they've raised how many million was it? Okay, so 40,000 students at 500 a pop. So they've raised 20 million, I believe, already. And they are expressing that they need more. If it's not crass for them to ask us for money, it should not be crass for us to ask questions about finances in turn.
Okay, so let's freeze there for a second. This was a situation going on, so there was a lot of questions being asked. Now before we move ahead in the timeline, let's break this apart from a leadership point of view. But from a leadership perspective, you're dealing right now with a situation where you made the call to do that price increase and to put a banner and a newsletter out that announces that without any prior communication. That's a call that's being made. And that's fine. That's fine by itself. You can make that call. There might be all sorts of reasons why that call is fine. We don't know that at this point. But the effect of that call is that there is rumblings happening within the community that are asking all sorts of different questions from all sorts of different perspectives. So, for example, from the financial perspective, but also from the feature delivery perspective, and also from the discrepancy in available information perspective. If you are dealing as a leader with that specific situation, and Frankie, I would love to hear what you think about this as well. But I think the proper thing to do, especially because the rumblings were there was quite a bit going on. One of the things you could do, for example, is look at this and say, okay, we might have made a call that was a bit too early. And clearly we've missed the mark, because there's across the entire community, there's a lot of questions coming forward, and there's a lot of unclarity, there's a lot of confusion going on. So clearly we've had to do a little bit of communication on that front in order to smooth this out. Because once again, a 20% increase is one thing. The claim that there's enough funding, but all of a sudden you need more funding, that's also another thing. That's not per se bad. That doesn't imply bad leadership at all, because we've all been in business. We know that things can be more expensive in the end. We know that if we start working on a piece of software, we know that we might run into problems that make it way more costly, or that during development we figure out that the scope needs to be larger. Or that we need more resources from outside, people or technology, that we need more. Everything can change. So there might be very good answers why that narrative changed. So, again, there is a lot of confusion. So the number one thing that is absolutely important is communication. Understand why these questions are being asked. And the reason why they are being asked is because there was no prior communication prior to the announcement. That's fine. That's a little bit of a mistake, but it's not about you making a mistake. It's about how you deal with the mistake. And everybody makes mistakes perfectly fine. So the next thing, I believe, that should be absolutely crucial is make a statement like, okay, guys, we understand where you're coming from. We've put something out that you did not expect, and we did it quite early on in the process while we haven't delivered the features yet that you were promised. There's a good reason why we did that. We need to lay those out, and it's quite clear that we absolutely need to take some time in order to make that clear to you. So we're gonna think about this. We're gonna come back with a proper response. Give us a couple of days. Don't worry about this. We'll get back to you. And in the meantime, we'll take the banner off. So we'll see what happens after that. Something along those lines. That would make sure that people know, okay, it's fine. Management got this. We've been heard. They're going to take care of it. And soon we're going to get more information. And then take it from there. Whatever, whether the increase happens, yes or no, it doesn't matter at that point. You can take it from that point. But at least then all the noses are faced in one direction. Management and students have the exact same idea of what's happening and what needs to be done. And you can even make the argument that students then have more sympathy for it because now they understand what the vision is. Now they understand why that price increase needs to happen, because there might be a very good reason for it. So you might create, with doing that, create a situation that students might actually want that price increase to happen because they want the effect that is being outlined or where that need is. They might want that need to happen. So that's my take on what the proper way to deal this would have been. So Frankie, let me start with you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in cases. Well, let me back up a little bit. I read Extreme Ownership in 2018, and I have been
By
putting
Jocko
that
Willink.
in, yes, by Jocko Willink, about, you do have to take ownership, and if you're at the top, you have to listen to those who are, in a station perhaps below your particular position. And if you're at the bottom, you have to make sure that your management understands what's going on at your level, because sometimes they're just too far removed to see it. And so since I read that in 2018, I've been trying to put that into practice in everything that I do in business. And I've been in leadership positions, and I've been in cases where the projects that I was working on, for the most part, we delivered them on time, but every now and again we'd run into something. I have a particular example where I had a very prestigious client that wanted some data, and right before we were supposed to deliver it to them, they were on a very tight deadline. I looked over the data again, and I was like, I'm not comfortable putting my name behind this, and I would rather own up to that mistake than and deal with whatever those consequences are. Like, they might be really mad at me, but I would so much rather that than put out a false narrative and cause actual problems further on up the road. So, like, I've been in those uncomfortable management situations where it's like, okay, something that we didn't want to happen has happened. What can we do to give the best possible outcome? And in
Right.
that case, you have to be, there's a level of transparency you have to have. In some way, it's kind of a level of vulnerability as well. And there could be consequences that are not good. I've had other cases where I just was honest and truthful about situations to people who were much higher up than I was. And I could have been risking, my reputation and a lot of stuff, but instead, like, that management actually took what I said, and they were like, wow, we didn't see it this way. We're grateful that you explained it, and now we're going to take some steps to mitigate this thing that we were kind of blind to. So, like, um, I've been in both of those positions. I've been in the leadership position where it's uncomfortable there, and I've been in the position of trying to lead upwards and just inform management, hey, you might want to be aware of this. This could lead to other issues up the road. And in those cases, it is a matter of just, let's be clear, let's be transparent, let's put a plan in place. There's a proverb that says that without a vision, the people perish. And I think that there can be, in cases where things aren't going the way that people expect them to be, there can be that confusion that we've already expressed. And I think kind of when you're getting into it, then there's just kind of an underlying fear. Like, is this still the same thing we thought it was? How can we still achieve this goal? What is the goal? And those things need to be made clear, because I think just by the nature of life, we kind of can get sidetracked in some of those things.
Well, if you don't give any message at all, then the potential is everything. Everything can happen. There might be any reason. So people might have all kinds of different ideas why this might happen. People start speculating about everything because there is no official answer. We don't know where we're going to go. So all those questions that you've just asked, and the one that Dusty, for example, asked, because it came forward that the eventual price will be 4,000 for 4 years. Okay, but over how long of a period would that then increase? Those kind of people don't know. So then speculation happens. And in this specific case, when there's, let's call it confusion, you don't want to add that level of speculation to it with too much silence. That doesn't That doesn't bode well. You need to give out a clear, even if you ask for more time, just be clear. Be clear what you can expect. Guys, we missed the mark. Give us a couple of days. We'll come back with a statement. Super
Yeah.
clear.
Can I add so all of that is brilliant, right? From like a
Mhm.
business and a leadership perspective. I want to add something about tone and like the human perspective of like customer
Mhm.
experience and like managing your customer base. Tone is really important. And I think it's important to be kind, to appreciate. I think you need to be very sensitive to the value, the time, the emotional investment that users in this community had put into it. Sensitive to the power dynamics. Jordan Peterson is an extremely well-respected, famous, and influential figure, and there are users in the community who admire him almost to the point that it's embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, I respect him, and I don't think I go to that. Yeah, I don't think I'm like that far, but that's valid, right? Like, this is a hero. Like, this is somebody's heroes, and the CEO of this company is the hero's daughter, and people have been following his advice. And like Jordan Peterson will talk in interviews and he'll be like, I cry at the meet and greets because these people don't have to like me and they do, you know, and they'll tell me these stories of how my teachings have changed their life, and he's like in tears. So there's this like this altruistic, sentimental, there's this emotional investment, there's a power dynamic at play because of his influence. And I think it's really important. Like, it's not just leadership from like a business perspective. There is a very, very strong cultural and social dynamic to be considerate of. And like,
Mhm.
for myself, even when responses from administration were polite, I I felt there was an element personally, and I'm a little bit more brash than you guys, I understand, but I felt there was an element of perhaps like disrespect for the users in the responses. And so I'll give you an example. I had written, so January 1st, I wrote to administration for clarity because people were talking on social and it was a lot of speculation. And so, me being extremely assertive, I was like, I will write to admin and I will put an end to speculation by getting an answer, right? Like, enough speculation. I want answers. I was super honest about it, right? Hey, I saw the price increase. 3 years all at once. That's like 720 plus taxes in Canadian each year. Um, you had a really, really great Black Friday sale like 5 minutes ago, but we didn't know the price was about to go up. Right? Like, so they had a much better deal like a month earlier, and none of us knew that our subscriptions weren't locked in. I remember community being like, we already got our subscription. It's fine. And so I wrote and I said, well, is the accreditation coming up soon, do you think? Like, is that going to be 2024, like before I make this decision? I said, are there upcoming developments that prompted the price increase that we don't know about yet? Is there a chance for like discounts for internationals who have a crazy US dollar exchange rate, right? That came up in the community conversations later.
Mhm.
I was like, we really appreciate Peterson Academy. Thank you so much for like taking my email, sort of deal. Um, and the response I got was very polite. I want to make that clear, right? The wording, we underpriced the subscription due to our beta stage. I find that problematic because it was streaming content and an unfinished platform. I don't know that for our first few months experience, $500 is underpriced for that. Right. So that's subjective. I understand what they're saying, like the value of the content and production cost. But to me, I'm, I don't know that, I don't know. For me, I just like, that doesn't really answer my question. You know what I mean? Like, for me as a community person, as Peterson Academy grows, we're adjusting our rates to reflect the platform's value. So I understand that is a marketing spin, right? However, we're allowing students to lock in the current rate of 500 for up to 3 years. And we do foresee the price increasing further given the platform's expansion. And then we also offer Afterpay, which I don't do credit services. So that's a credit service. So um, yeah, so that was the answer. That was the answer. And so for me, um, it wasn't empathetic to the question. That's what I felt. I didn't feel it was empathetic. And so I had offered a follow up, and I said, well, if we can lock in the subscription for 3 years, is there any reason why our subscriptions can't renew at their current price for 3 years, but no more after that? Like, I just had questions. I wanted to dialogue, but there was no response after that. At which point, started discussing it more openly on the social, just asking questions. But for me, like that's
Well,
not respectful. And then, like when Mikhaila made her post in response to Frankie made a joke about it, the price increase, and I felt that Mikhaila's response was so disrespectful to the community that then I was angry. So
What was the response, Frankie, to your? So what kind of post did you make, and what was the response to that?
so a couple of things real quick. I
Hmm.
mean, Dusty, everything you just read in that email didn't actually answer the questions you had.
right,
So, like, the tone is one thing that might be able to be overlooked if they had actually provided you with any sort of clarity, but from what I can tell, it only added to the confusion because they said, yes, you can lock in your price or it'll just keep going up. But they didn't give
yeah,
you a specified amount, how much it could go up, or a time frame of when. And so now it has had the opposite effect of what you maybe had intended, which was, okay, let me get some clarity. Now it's like, oh, there's actually more confusion here,
well,
and
yeah.
we don't know what it
How
is.
much is it going up and by when? And why can't you tell me about the develop? That was my Sicilian face for those who haven't seen the other podcast. Ugh. Um, yeah, so we just started asking those questions more publicly, right? And which, please remember, for people, we were used to Mikhaila and her husband answering development and price questions. They did pop in to engage in the community rather than sending out updates. So there was a total normal precedent for that.
Yeah, I'll Jeffrey, I'm gonna get to yours and I might ask you to repeat the question, but I think some extra stuff because we're kind of touching on it now. Um, Mikhaila and Jordan Fuller both were fairly participatory in some of the stuff and about questions. I posted a meme back on October 13th that was a joke because some people were starting to share their concern that final exams hadn't come about yet because there were people who at that point had been on the platform for almost 2 months, a month and a half, and had finished a number of classes and they were like, man, I'm putting all this time and energy into these classes and the exams still aren't there. Am I going to have to go back and rewatch the entire class in order to do well on the exam? And
Hmm.
that tension was kind of palpable back then. And usually, like, I'm very careful with the tone of my memes. Like, I want them to be funny and uplifting. And a lot of them are honestly more like, Jordan Fuller actually reached out to me when DMs became a thing. He reached out to me on the side and told me that some of my memes might be able to be called ad worthy because they were good. And like that was an intentional thing. Creating I wanted to do my part to try and help create a culture where it was just this positive, let's talk about all the great things that are Jordan Peterson and Peterson Academy. Um,
Hmm.
and so, like the October 13th one, that one particularly sticks out in my mind because it was one of the first times I had ever used one to be mildly critical of something. Like it was a very implied criticism, but it was kind of to try and provide some comic relief because of the tension that people had continued to express about the lack of exams. And Mikhaila actually jumped in there and commented like same day, I think she said soon, two exclamation points. And so soon is a kind of a joke in business because when you say soon and you don't follow up with a deadline, that can mean anything. Like depending on, I've worked in small companies and I've worked in global companies, um, and soon can be tomorrow or it can be 3 years from now, depending on the kind of business you're running. And we didn't know what kind of a business Peterson Academy was, and I think whereas up until they started to ask for more money up front, people were able to very easily just dismiss the fact that features were lacking. So it wasn't like it's not that people then just got hypercritical. It's just that a lot of things that people had decided weren't worth bringing up too much became more important because now we're like, okay, I mean, the way I see it, and maybe this is an arrogant way to look at it, but the way I saw it was, all right, I'm an investor in a new product, I need, like, convince me that it is worth, like, I'm a new business owner. I haven't been in business for even 2 years right now. And so, asking me to invest $1,500 up front is a little more than I'd be comfortable with right now. And um, so I was like, all right, like, maybe it is totally worth it. Just provide me some extra context so that I can say, okay, like, is it worth, you know, are there avenues of revenue I ought to be pursuing that that will help me to pay for this? But then to expect it within 3 weeks with very little warning, that is something where I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna have to pull from certain savings accounts that, I'd rather not have to pull from. Where can I convince me that it's worth it to
Give
make
me a
that
reason.
investment? Yeah.
That's right.
So that's kind of why it wasn't that people all of a sudden were just hypercritical of missing features. It's that there were a lot of things that we were willing to forgive, um, that when they started to kind of put pressure on us, like, hey, give us more money, it was like, okay, well, hang on. So far, you've overpromised and underdelivered. And we've been willing to turn a blind eye because it hasn't been relevant. But now that you're asking us to put our pocketbook, well, you know, put your mouth where our money is, right? Like, it's just, I didn't think it was inappropriate, but I could tell at the time that, and now we'll get to the part that I think you asked about, Jeffrey. I
Mhm.
could tell based on some of the stuff, um, that there were some tensions that were rising and people were starting to become concerned because of the lack of clear messaging. And even earlier on, somebody else who thought we were, I think mistakenly just thought we were being kind of rabble rousers and things, started to kind of do this whole meme campaign against us of like, oh, just
Yes.
trust the system. And we were like, "Uh, no, some of us actually have some business experience, and
Well,
this
yeah.
isn't." And so, like, I had actually written, I had very much tried to write a very thoughtful response that was like, look, if this isn't a money problem, there's a bigger thing at play here. If we're talking about the value of the platform, it's already exceeded the value in spite of the missing features for me. Um,
Mhm.
but here is, I tried to lay out kind of what the bigger student concerns were, and that kind of was it. There were some people who seemed very grateful for that and others who dismissed it, and that's fine. That's kind of just what we grew to expect there. But then the tensions continued to rise, and so um, on January 1st, Mikhaila had posted a list of her New Year's goals. And so what got me in trouble, I think, um, was that, or what kind of brought more things out into the open, perhaps, was that I took um, that list. She had some things blacked out because, there are things that should be kept private. And under her Peterson Academy one, where she had a large part blacked out, I put raise prices.
So that thing where it, yeah, so she posted a meme with the goal list, and where some of them were blacked out in white, wrote price hike. I had came up with that concept and I sent it to Frankie on Discord.
Yeah.
I was like, look at my joke, price hike on the New Year's goals list. And I was like, please don't post that, because I don't have the relational I didn't have the reputational capacity to post something like that on Peterson Academy. I was like, that would get me in so much trouble. This is not for posting. I'm like, I don't want to cause trouble. This is just me expressing frustration to Frankie. And she was like, can I post that as a meme? And I was like, don't blame me, because I wouldn't get away with posting that.
Frankie. So you had the meme, and the meme was the yearly the yearly, how do you call it, accomplishment list, the list of things you wanted to do in 2025.
Yeah, like a list of resolutions. And Mikhaila had been
Right.
open enough and willing to share that with the group,
Yeah.
her list. She had a few things blacked out because that just makes sense. Like, some things are more private, and that makes sense. One of them happened to be over the Peterson Academy things. And in light of everything that was going on, I put price hike in there. It was not
Mhm.
my original idea, but I thought at the time, one, I had been incredibly respectful up until that point. I also, like, part of what has given me a lot of confidence to be humorous in the Peterson Academy platform was Dr. Peterson's conversation with Matt Rife last year, where he talked about how good comedy actually kind of treads that line of, is it, is it offensive? Because it like being able to present a truth in such a way where it's borderline offensive but also true, and therefore you laugh at it, like that's really important.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite funny actually when I saw that, because it's a really good way to cope with it, right? Because you know
Yeah.
that within the whole community, that specific subject is the thing that's being discussed non-stop. There was a huge confusion. So when you posted it, actually, it is in some way it was a sense of relief. You had me laughing. I found it quite quite hilarious actually.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. And but that was it, right? Like the intention was the relief that comic relief is intended to bring. And
Right.
so like it did land, and it was getting pretty up there as far as like there were a lot of people who were liking it, and people who had commented like, "Oh, I'm so glad you posted this," that kind of thing. I don't have the
Yeah.
exact records, but it was like I just wanted to make it clear I didn't think the subject was taboo. Um, I also was very careful when I made the meme. Like, I didn't want to look like I was attacking Mikhaila directly. Like, I still don't have anything personally against her. Like, it's just because we might have disagreements in how to run a business and stuff. Like, it's
No, but
not.
you don't have to defend this at all. This was
No.
just a jest for a situation that was accurate at that moment, and it was
Yeah.
funny, and people reacted positively to it. It's just a
Yeah.
good, funny way to deal with something that was quite serious and quite confusing for a lot of people.
People
But
thanked
to give
you.
you a little bit, what was that?
People thanked you. Like I agree with Jeff. Like they were
Yeah.
really relieved to have a place for it to be okay for them to have misgivings and to joke and to like make what that which was taboo not taboo. It was a really good tension breaker. Like it took a lot of courage to post it. I would have been scared too, but I think it landed really well.
Yeah. Yeah. The reception I got from the other students was very good. And the only reason, Jeffrey, why I sound like I'm defending it is actually because I'm building up to just how far I went to try to make it as non-offensive as possible, which is
Mhm.
that I very intentionally removed both Michaela's face and name from the post.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody knew it was hers, but like I wasn't trying to like ridicule her. I just wanted to make it clear that it was okay to discuss this stuff. And I think it landed exactly the way I had intended it to.
Mhm.
So hopefully that gives a little bit of context. Um, let's see what else. Okay, so when I posted that, it did land pretty well. Uh, and Mikhaila, I believe that same evening, wrote a response. Dusty, do you want to kind of go over that?
I think the best way to handle Michaela's response to you, if it's possible for you, do you want to just read it? Because it's public. Do you
Sure.
want to, but I think your tone of voice, as we've discussed about, I tend towards, I'm angry with her for this response and you're not. So I think it would be better if you read it, but then I would like to comment on it.
Sure. Let me just find it really quickly because I have all kinds of and like just to give you a bit of further, I've got it here. All right, just to give a little further context, like I had, for example, like when Brian the Troll was banned, I somebody had actually requested that I make a meme to commemorate it. And it was like I was going to bed. It was like after midnight. And I actually went and got to my computer and made a meme really quickly right before I went to bed. And like within a few minutes of posting, both Mikhaila and her husband, Jordan Fuller, had both favorited it. Like,
Liked
and
it, yeah.
yeah, like they had liked the post. And so I could see there had been a bit of rapport built up. Probably 2 or 3 weeks into the whole thing, Jordan had actually reached out to me on email to ask if he could use one of my comments in a paid advertisement for Peterson
Mhm.
Academy. So there was a certain amount of rapport. Even like I was in touch with like their support team had sent me a thank you email back after I filed another bug report or feature request or something saying thank you so much for contributing to this stuff regularly, like it's really helpful. And some of their developers had reached out to me. Also, like, I don't mean to say all of this to, toot my own horn or anything. I just think it's relevant. When direct messages became a thing and Jordan Fuller had reached out to me saying that some of my memes were ad worthy, I had mentioned that I actually had the idea to start an Instagram account and start putting them on there, and I could tag them if they wanted to kind of repost them as kind of advertisements or something.
Mhm.
And he said he wouldn't be opposed to that. And so, like, that day, I started an Instagram account. I started posting on there, and I'm Jordan Fuller was my first follower on there because I sent him a link to it. And then I'm pretty sure the other two people who followed me afterwards, because I didn't advertise this at all, I'm pretty sure both of the other two were some kind of Peterson Academy staff. I'm certain one of them was. So, like, I had a bit of rapport going with these guys. Like, so I felt safe enough. I was like, well, clearly they know I care about the platform and that, like, I'm not intentionally being mean or anything. So all of that to just give a little extra context, like, I never in a million years, like, being expelled from Peterson Academy for making memes was definitely not on my 2025 bingo card. Um, it was, if anything, I just felt like I was in a position where posting this would provide that relief of tension and people would know where I was coming from. So, like, my reputation could handle it.
That's what I thought. I thought your reputation could handle that. Yeah, I didn't think mine would, but I really thought yours could.
What was the response to that meme, Frankie?
All right, so this is what Mikhaila posted. She said, I mean this with love because I really enjoy your memes, but I've been working since I was in grade 2, stole books, shoveled snow, raked, cleaned cars, then had a paper route that really gouged me, then multiple restaurant and bar jobs. I was making enough when I was 15 at an ice rink, working evenings and weekends to easily afford $50 a month for a university education and would have been thrilled with it. I don't come from money at all, and I didn't really have extra money until I was 26. But it's not hard to get a starter job and move your way up if you make yourself useful. Other than the fact that those jobs are exhausting. Like I've said before, the goal price point wasn't always Sorry guys. Like I've said before, the goal price point was always 4K for a degree. It's in old marketing. We managed to decrease that for beta users. We also have a short-term goal of providing access to PA for low-income students and vets, but if $50 a month is too much, and you're not in a position where you're a vet or a single parent, you should probably change jobs and/or work harder. Resentment is poisonous and can destroy your life. You have to figure things out because nobody else will for you. Hopefully the information and community on this platform will help, but ultimately it's up to you. Really appreciate you guys. Great things are coming, but I wanted to respond to people complaining about $50 a month for the quality of these courses because that's ridiculous.
Dusty, when you read that, what went through your head?
Well, first I laughed because, okay, here's my first take was this. We are asking straightforward questions so that we can make a financial decision, right? So we're asking for more information. Why the push for 3 years investment right now in the next 3 weeks? What is the timeline for developments? How much will the price go up by when? So for instance, like our when our subscription comes up in August, how much will it be at that point? We're asking questions like that. So we can decide, should we be doing the splurge on the 3-year enrollment all at once? Should we not? And also, not all users are paying in US dollars. And also, the Academy was advertised as a place where, education is accessible to everyone. Out of 40,000 students, absolutely there are going to be some people, even if they're not a single parent, even if they're not a veteran, for whom, $500 US or $1,500 US right now in the next 3 weeks for some people that is going to be a lot, and it's completely valid for them to have questions about whether they should be making that investment given that there is no testing and no exams and no accreditation yet. The questions are completely valid, and I found the post to be incongruent to the actual to the tone of the actual inquiries that were coming from the customer base, the user base. I found it to be very personal. Like it was very strange to me. Like very, very personal response to what I felt should have maybe have been addressed as like a business question. And because it was made personal, like this is who I am and the things that I have done personally, and to use language such as, if you make yourself useful, you should get another job or work harder if you have these questions. I found that so disrespectful. And you have to understand, I'm not insecure. I'm a hard worker. I've been improving my situation. I needed more information to decide if this sizable chunk of money should be paid now or later. And I wanted to know what was going on. So I didn't feel insecure about it. But when I saw people's comments, like, what the heck? I live in Mexico. What the heck? I'm on disability. And there were no empathetic responses given to that. I laughed and then I was angry. Like, I just think that is a very disrespectful way to speak to a community of people. And it was confusing to me because of this blurred line between what is this university or is it a business? Are you speaking to us as a CEO? Are you speaking to us as the dean of a school? Are you speaking to us as like a peer on Twitter, like on X? Like, is this, I was very confused by it. And so after that, I was, replying to comments and I was saying things like, well, you have to understand. And I was trying to give the benefit of the doubt in the comments. I was like, I think Mikhaila is professional enough to know that these questions are coming from a place of, this is business. We just want to know how to make a decision. Good intention. Some of us, this really will be a lot to fork over all at once. Even though I'm doing better, I don't feel totally stable and secure. That chunk of money could be put elsewhere. I want to know that this is a good investment to make right now. I want to know how much it's going to cost me later, and she gave a reply to me. She was like 100%, and there'll be, help for veterans kind of thing. That might have been in my post about the Canadian exchange rate. And so that was the only response she gave. Like, I didn't see any responses to people's heartfelt, I feel offended. Like, not me. People were saying, like, I feel offended by this. This tone is not professional. And so I was looking at it like, oh, this is such a mess and it doesn't have to be.
What really seemed to trip people up was the sentence, maybe you should work harder. Or maybe you should change jobs.
It's a little inflammatory.
But there's also a couple of hidden assumptions in there, because you're implying that people are not working hard enough, and you're pretty much throwing out the window every possible reason why people might have that might not even the problem, might have those questions. You're throwing out all the possibility, and you're just saying, hey, you're probably not working hard enough.
And Jeffrey, but people told her why in the comments. That's why I said, like, I am upset with Mikhaila Fuller right now. Like, not as in like I hate the woman, but I don't think that was not nice. Like, that wasn't. I'm not okay with speaking to people that way. And again, because of the power dynamic, this is not just Mikhaila Fuller, CEO of Peterson Academy, an up and coming streaming platform that may or may not ever be accredited, right? This is the daughter of Jordan Peterson, and the Academy is named after Jordan Peterson. And so these people are like, Jordan Peterson has our best interests at heart. He's inspiring me to overcome my worst demons and better myself. And so I'm really seeing it from that community, that relational dynamic. And to me, it was just like the daughter of people's heroes, kind of just like slapping them in the face for asking uncomfortable questions. And I'm not saying that was her intent, but I'm saying this was the behavior and the perception. And I am not okay with it. And that's why I continued to be vocal. And then you had users who felt emboldened to post things like, it's incredible to me that so many people at Peterson Academy don't even follow his own teachings. with the implication like they are so lazy and they are not actually aiming upward and all they do is criticize this academy. And like there was this tone that people felt emboldened to bring that then I was I had to push against that because I was like defending the people. They are not bad people.
So before we go there, because this what you're saying definitely happened. It was very divisive, and there was a form of tribalism going on. There was a form of group forming
Mhm.
going on. But before we go there, Frankie, this message was a reaction, was a repost actually of your meme. So a repost, for everybody who's watching and listening who doesn't know, a repost is taking a post from another person, reposting it with your own comment at the top of it, and that makes sure, because it's a repost, it's considered new, and therefore it's placed at the top of the feed, which means that everybody who was active on the Peterson Academy social environment saw that message at the top of their feed. It could not be missed if you were active at that moment. So, Frankie, the same question that I just asked Dusty, I would also like to ask you: what went through your mind when you saw that repost?
I was surprised at the tone. I guess my uh I guess it was further reinforcement that the meme landed because of the comments that people were putting in. It was one of those things where, it's a silly analogy, but it really works, is um yeah, it's that whole idea there's no such thing as a dragon, right? Like
Mm,
we were pulling on a very small thread that was um okay, the price is increasing. And that could have very easily been swept under a rug with some communication. Uh, but it seemed that in her doing that, it actually showed that even those of us who had doubted that anything really nefarious, or and I still don't think anything nefarious is going on, but those of us who had doubts that anything, we still thought we might be on the right track. We just didn't have enough information to know if it was worth reinvesting. And that really for me was a moment of, oh, okay, something isn't right, something is going poorly, so there is more going on behind the curtain than we're aware of. And so bringing this out in humor has actually brought something, even like, this has struck an even deeper chord than I realized was there. Um, so that was kind of my initial kind of processing of it. My next thought after that was, okay, well, it's really late and I don't want Peterson Academy to burn but while I'm away. Like, I don't want anything to go wrong. But like, it requires a better response than I have time to give tonight, like more thoughtful.
and in your mind, what would have proper response have been? Not from you, but instead of the work harder, what would the proper response have been? You think?
Well, I mean, at that point, prior to that response,
Hmm.
the focus was still on just looking for better communication. Like, there was no uh, sense of derision towards students and things. So I think if there had been anything kind of, I think we talked about it way earlier here, is, if there had been some messaging like, hey, we hear you, we understand, we have some things in place that are coming. Give us a few days and we'll get back to you. Even something like that. Well, which brings me to my response. Like, that night, I made sure I at least took responsibility to, in the comments of her post, just write a thank you for responding. I appreciate knowing where you're coming from, because I at least got a better sense of what was going on. And this deserves a longer response than I can give you tonight. I meant no offense. Like, this wasn't intended as a personal attack, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And just know I will have a response forthcoming, probably tomorrow. I'm just going to give it as much time as it needs.
And you wanted to also let it sink in a little bit to give it some proper thought before impulsively just putting something out there as a response. Yeah.
Yeah, what? Never write a letter angry, I think, is an old rule that. um
Yeah.
yeah, and I wasn't angry anyway. I was just like, huh, there's a lot to unpack here.
Hmm.
I thought it was interesting the assumptions that were made. Like, um, some of my financial, how do I put it? Like I'm not financially inept. I paid off all my student loans and I got myself out of debt back in 2018. Like I learned financial management um, so finances aren't like an issue for me. I would say some of the hesitation I've had is more because the stuff I alluded to earlier, just some of the more difficult stuff I've been through um, has been more of a stretch on my finances because of some of the psychological ramifications of things I was dealing with than I would have liked. But it was certainly not like this isn't coming from somebody who doesn't know how to manage her money. Like I said, I'm running my own business. I know what I'm doing. So there were a lot of um, implications and assumptions that I was like, well, I mean, maybe this is true of some people, but this certainly doesn't describe me. And my guess is it probably doesn't. Well, the comments from other people
That's the
showed that
thing.
it.
Like, sorry, I get frustrated because it's like, well, what if it is true of some people? You have a platform of 40,000 people who are trying to better themselves. That's part of the mission statement. So say
That's the
there's
point.
people there. Yeah, well, say there's people there and they're like, okay, 500 a year, I can watch some stuff as I'm trying to climb out of the hot mess my life is right now. Jordan Peterson literally speaks to that demographic. And
Yeah,
so my whole thing is, so what if they are having a hard time financially and they don't, for whatever reason, have the time or capacity to go work in an ice rink right now or shovel snow or get a paper route? Like, my thing is, don't don't show contempt or disrespect for the community who is here in good faith supporting your vision. Like for me, I know that you're not as prone to like anger as me, but for me, I'm like, don't speak that way about my people. Like I care about this community and like I don't really feel that it applies to me either. I was happy to let people pretend that I'm a bum on the street who doesn't know what she's doing. Fine. But so what if I was? Like there have been times in my life where I hadn't fully recovered from the trauma of my upbringing. And I desperately needed things that I could cling to as I got my thoughts in order, my life in order. How many people there reading that are in that position? It makes me quite angry. Like you don't speak to people who have invested in your vision and who are trying to be part of a community who have questions. Like you just don't speak to them that way. Like I'm not saying I couldn't reconcile with her if I met her in person, but that
sure.
action displeases me personally.
Well, I spent like 9 hours solid or something working on the kindest response that I could just to try and clear things up.
Let's go for it.
All right, so here was my response to this, and pardon me, guys, because it's going to be a little long. Although, to be fair, I did even trim it. And now that I say that, I realize I have the long version. Just a second. Here we go. Okay, here it is. I wrote, Hey, Mikhaila, thank you for your response so I can better understand where you are coming from. Let me start by saying that Peterson Academy means the world to me, and while I dislike that we have to have this discussion because disagreement resolution isn't fun, I hope that it'll be worthwhile and will ultimately lead to a stronger unity in the PA community on the whole. I appreciate your being so open about why you think your background qualifies my criticism as unfair, so I think it would be of some value for me to be open and kind. Your family's background is something I find quite endearing because I relate a lot to how you guys lived when you didn't have much growing up. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and my parents worked very hard to make ends meet when we were young. I sold candles and chocolates to raise money for my school from around the 2nd grade on up, mucked goat and chicken stalls and cared for animals, had lemonade stands, started officially working for the family photography business at age 12, sold t-shirts and magnets I designed, and paid my own way through engineering school after dropping out of college the first time around and working at an Aldi for a while. So I'm not exactly a stranger to either hard work or personal growth. I'm not resentful about the price hikes, and I don't actually have any expectations or desires for you to bail me out or solve my problems. I'm where I am today as a product of an unexpected life shift and my own decision to start a business, despite a massive pay cut, so that I could better serve my industry and provide services that fill a wide gap of abdicated responsibility. I'm in my current position because of decisions I've made, and I'm willing to own every one of them. I've decided to walk a path where I'm back to having almost no money for a time, and that's a choice that's my problem and nobody else's. I can regularly I regularly turn down job offers, some for 6 figures, because I believe I'm on the right path. I can get another job in my field quickly if needed, and I think that taking the easy, comfortable path of regular employment right now would be neglecting the call to adventure I've finally been able to answer. I've worked odd jobs throughout the year to fill gaps when needed, including door dashing and working part-time as a photographer again. So you're totally right that we'll come up with the money if we're creative and determined and willing to work hard. It's not about the money, it's about trust. And I'm only bringing this up because of how greatly I desire for you guys to succeed in your endeavor and not to lose the trust of some of your most enthusiastic and proactive supporters. It's admittedly not really pleasant for me to be engaged in a disagreement with someone who's fairly well known in some pretty big circles and whose father's work I adore. But this isn't the first time I've been at the ground level of building up a community. In my professional years, I've seen companies lose the trust of their customers because they overpromised and underdelivered and lost credibility by not acknowledging their shortcomings and adjusting their messaging to be adequately transparent. What do you think the risk would be in communicating how developments are progressing or what hurdles you're facing that need to be overcome? I've been working around software development life cycles for years, and I totally don't care about missing features or delays because I know they're a typical part of the process. People who are aware of and understand the difficulties are much more inclined to be understanding if deliverables aren't met, if the vision changes for pragmatic reasons, etc. I think it would go a really long way if you guys would own those and manage our expectations so that we can make an informed decision about whether or not to continue to invest in this endeavor. Without any prior announcement about the impending rising subscription costs, in what way could one have made an informed decision during the Black Friday sale? The lack of transparency stymies growth and engagement from the best minds and results in an environment of stagnation and frustration. I would prefer to see PA not go down this path and, hoping I'm not overestimating my worth here, believe I have enough experience and reason to voice that concern. I very much want to be here for the long run, proudly wearing PA merch to advertise it to the world, and continuing to enjoy the betterment this platform affords. I'm totally willing to be wrong in my view here too, if I can see where my error lies so that I can honestly say why I've changed my mind. I just don't think I'm wrong based on the reactions of many people here who clearly had the same misgivings, but were hitherto unwilling to voice them until the humorous posting on the topic made them realize that there was some breathing room to address things that had been bothering them for some time as well. I wish you guys all the best, regardless of your decisions or take on this, and I look forward to enjoying at least the next several months of PA access, and hopefully many more to come after that as well. Thank you so much for your time and consideration on these things. With much gratitude and goodwill to you and yours, Frankie.
Right. So this really sounds like a very honest attempt to do a couple of things to set the vision straight. That is not just about working harder. That is not just about the problem of the $50 extra, and that in this case it was not a problem of money specifically for you in your letter. You were saying there's a lack of context, there's a lack of communication, there's a lack of understanding of why the choices that are being made. So the only thing that I am asking of you right now is to just be transparent about your process. Let us know why these calls were being made. Let us know how we can even help. Give us a reason to extend, and not in a aggressive way, like, hey, give us a reason or else we won't do this. But it came from a good place. It was actually legitimate interest because, like you outlined, every single person, I think, and it goes especially for the three of us, we want that platform to succeed because it is a beautiful platform. It is a beautiful idea run by people who are who have had gigantic impact on the world. And that's, I think, what you were aiming for in your letter primarily.
Yeah, I would like to, this is a bit of a devil's advocate, and just to give a fair context. So Frankie posted that, but the, the floodgates had been opened. So it is true that in the social space, so for instance, like Frankie gave that excellent letter and response, but there were also users such as Vlad, who was later summarily banned without warning, who also gave sort of a business-minded, lengthy post, detailing, hey, just from a business standpoint and a user standpoint, this is what I think is happening here. These are some ways, like, respectfully, that I think this could be managed in such a way that everybody comes out of this better. But there are some updates that maybe are needed, some transparency that is needed. I had posted, just explaining to people, listen, this is what, $1,000 US dollars is for a Canadian. And then there are others as well. Like, so let's not minimize entirely, but let's wait for more information. And then there were users who we will call T, right? Because I want to be sensitive to some people, but so then T was out there, and she said things that were more heartfelt about, like, this, I don't feel comfortable about what's going on. Multiple users were saying, this is weird how this is being handled. So the floodgates were kind of opened. And so I can see that it did become a thing, right? And then you had response posts. So when I was mentioning the person who, when I imitated her post, my tone was a little bit snarky. Like somebody who had said, well, what jobs do you guys have? And, well, I can't believe people here aren't following the teachings of Jordan Peterson. Things that just became kind of a mudslinging instead of addressing the issue. And then what happens is, the more people do that and that tribalism starts, then you either just let it sit, or you respond, and then they respond, and then you respond, and then they respond. And so there was definitely a snowball effect. It definitely was impacting what was like the vibe. The conversation was definitely dominated by this sort of sense of, just shut up and stop talking about what's going on. And then we need answers, and this actually matters because we care about the vision, and just people not understanding each other. So it was like that. I think it could have been de-escalated if Mikhaila and her husband had responded politely to Frankie, because the community had started to kind of look to her as a spokesperson because she broke the tension with that meme. And instead, what happened was Mikhaila and her husband reposted people who were kind of on the subtext, either overtly or via subtext, were disparaging the people who were asking questions. So they reposted those people. It created a vibe where people didn't feel heard. Yet. And things were definitely tense. Now for me, the last thing I posted was, I quote replied to the person who angered me by low-key insulting the community, right? You people and the people here who are complaining don't follow Jordan Peterson's teachings. I'm just like, leave the people alone, all right? Can we just talk business here? And you don't personally attack my people. So I was polite, but I firmly said, I can't believe the contempt that I'm seeing towards the community. And then I saw Mikhaila's final post, which I do have a screenshot of if that needs to be read. The final post was, we've gotten rid of downvotes. Hearts have been implemented as the only way to respond to a comment. Anybody who has any questions, problems with the price increase, or thinks that we should respond to every single question is welcome to write to our service email for a refund. And that's it. And when I saw that, I went like this and I didn't post. And a couple hours later, I was banned.
You mentioned a couple of things really quickly that I think are absolutely crucial to point out. So one of the first features that was available in the Peterson Academy social environment was the capacity to upvote or downvote. That basically means every single comment that is being made under a post written by a user can be either upvoted or downvoted. Upvoting means +1, downvoting means -1. And then you see a score next to it. So you see, for example, if the number next to it is in green, because green is positive, in this case red is negative. If there's a green 6, that means at least 6 upvotes were given. So now, bottom line, the number of upvotes is 6. And what at least I noticed happening was that under that original message that said work harder, there were quite a bit of people. It was not a small amount. There were quite a bit of people pretty much giving the response that you just laid out. They were quite upset about it. And their responses were upvoted very harshly. There was like 20, 30 upvotes on there, with people there. So there was a lot of support.
But I think what was happening is it was the contrast. So those comments were very obviously getting 20 upvotes. And then people who were saying, you should all be quiet. Mikhaila's right, get a job. They would be severely downvoted. And so I think it was the contrast. And I know there were also users
Mm.
who were saying inflammatory things, who were claiming that people were unjustly downvoting them, like as a troll tactic. And so I think that's just to be fair.
Yeah, a lot of us woke up to basically a different style of communication on Peterson Academy. Like that morning, it was like, oh, they've removed our ability to subtly voice our displeasure at some people's quotes without actually engaging with those people. And that seemed like a hampering of one's ability to speak the truth. Like sometimes those comments that I didn't downvote a lot, but when I did downvote somebody, it was because I wanted to show that I actively disliked what was being said, but I also didn't feel like it was my position because probably somebody else was already engaged in talking with that person. I didn't want to also jump into the comments and muddy the waters. So like it was a nice way to provide feedback of like, hey, don't really approve of this. However, um, I'm also not about to just escalate and make things worse either. So it was a strange, like all of a sudden we all have to pretend we're happy. It was a very odd move. It was like you're not allowed to be negative, and that kind of goes against anything. Like it goes against Jordan Peterson's stuff in a way. He talks about how in a relationship you're supposed to talk about the small things that bother you so they don't become large things. And it's like they're basically asking me to put money and time up front. It's not a marriage relationship, but it is a relationship. Like, and so my qualms ought to be addressed while they're small so that the overall experience is a good one. Like
Mhm.
if I have concerns, it's way better to voice them while they are little things rather than have those concerns continue to build up.
What Dusty just said, that indeed happened. You had groups that were forming. There was tribalism going on. There was people, on the group of, stop complaining about it, just move on, just pay the price increase and do as if nothing happened. And you had the group, who still had those legitimate questions and who just wanted a bit of communication. And when you talk about the groups, it it becomes very problematic because it implies that there's conflict between that group. There's different ways that a group is looking at things, and that by itself might not be very problematic because you can deal with that because we're all adults. We can talk with each other, we can find a solution, and we can move forward. It becomes problematic when there's no communication from leadership. And it becomes even more problematic when specific posts from a specific group get reposted, get extra support, and the lack of communication is still there. So nobody still knows what's going on. That's problematic. That's not a good position to be in for if you are working in a company and 1,000 employees don't know what's going on, or if it's in your family, everybody, there's a certain situation in your family, nobody knows what's going on. There needs to be communication. Something needs to happen. Something needs to be cleared up. We need to make sure that all the noses are aligned in the same position. They all face in the same direction.
Well, I would disagree that there was no communication, though. That was communication. No response is a response. So
Mm.
by reposting people from, one dominant viewpoint after having disparaged people of another, and then by saying hearts are implemented. If you think we owe you an answer, and if you have a problem with the price increases, which to me is a little bit of a misrepresentation of what was happening to begin with, because we wanted some clarity.
There weren't any problems. There were questions.
There were questions. It wasn't a problem yet. Because we didn't know what we were looking at yet to know if there was a problem. Like What's the timeline for updates? What's the value proposition here? We didn't know yet. But anyway, so it was framed as if you have a problem with the price, and if you think we owe you an answer all the time, which also I don't think is a accurate representation. We needed one response for everybody that was clear. Um, email us and we'll refund you. That's it. Like, we don't have time for this. That was very clear communication. It was a very strong message in conjunction with reposting people from a certain persuasion, a certain opinion. Very, very, very clear communication that this is how it's going to be. This is the culture we are now going to set. And if you have a problem with it, there's the door. So I think that's and it's an even stronger message when you factor in what happened next, because it was said, if you have a problem, email us for a refund. And what happened next to me is extremely telling. So interestingly, so Frankie was not the first person to be removed. The first person to be removed was T, who, had been open and honest. T also had concerns about the potential of unclear rules and regulations and people being banned without just cause. You know what I mean? So she was quite vocal. But not excessively. No, she was the first to be banned, blocked on Instagram, and then also banned from Peterson Academy.
What do you mean blocked on Instagram? What does it mean?
So she had been a follower of Peterson Academy on Instagram, and luckily a few of us already had contact outside of Peterson Academy on Discord. Otherwise, we all would have lost contact, by the way. So a few of us were talking like, what is this strange post from Mikhaila? And during that conversation, T posted and she was like, they just blocked me on Instagram. Like, I've never trolled them or said anything bad to them. One time I wrote to them something like, something inspiring. Like, I'm inspired to do this good thing. Like she said, like a long time ago, she said. But yeah, so they blocked her on Instagram and she told us. And then moments later, she was like, and now my account is deleted on Peterson Academy. We were like, what? So that was actually the first person. It was not somebody who was a regular contributor, but not Frankie. It wasn't Frankie first. And then like the Vlad guy also got axed, and then Frankie got axed. I don't know the exact order. And then somebody else, a German user, a woman got. All these people just started, and I think it was like 5 or 6 of us at first, and none of us had asked for a refund. So without the ability, if we hadn't already been in touch, people on the platform, in my opinion, would have been left with the conclusion that we had asked for a refund, like received the ultimatum. But no, without provocation, I never posted anything after that post from Mikhaila that said, if you have a problem, ask for. I had to think about that. I needed to observe and think, and I wanted the education. I was never of the opinion that Peterson Academy is bad and not worth the money and I'm just going to leave. I was trying to figure out if I was going to do 3 years, 2 years, or 1 year. Right. And I needed information. And next thing I know, I'm deleted. I'm unpersoned. And so were a few others. And very clear communication.
Can I want to fill in a couple of gaps. Because I want people to know exactly what we said so they can judge rightly. Okay. Which is that first of all, when I posted the meme that Mikhaila ultimately reposted, I joked about being sacked. I joked about being the jester who was going to get, executed. And it was a total joke because, like, I love absurd humor. It's my favorite kind. And I was like, surely, like, nothing I'm doing is that egregious. Like, I am obviously just poking fun. I'm trying to communicate very professionally. Like, I only brought in stuff about when I was a kid and some of my life stuff because that's what Mikhaila had done, and I thought I should return the kind of tone of what she was putting in there. And so, like, I was joking. There were some V for Vendetta GIFs and things going around. I know T posted one of those and I posted one of those, and it was kind of us just making light of the fact that people were not being responded to properly. It wasn't because we actually thought that's what we were living in. We were like, oh, this drawn to its absolute most hilariously out there absurd logical conclusion would be this. That's totalitarianism. And so there were some of those sorts of jokes going around. And I think some of us were more inclined to get a little more silly about things just because the pushback we were beginning to get from people who were just trying to make us be quiet was quite extensive. Like at one point, there was actually this whole campaign where people were posting pictures of their dogs just to try to drown out our concerns in the midst of all of this. And I actually liked seeing the pictures of people's dogs. It was just that somebody had actually said in the midst of it, they had said, hey, let's do this to drown them out. And we were like, hang on a minute, we need to be like, we're trying to raise some pretty valid stuff here. On the 8th, when we got booted, I think it might have been after Mikhaila had posted her thing that was like, you've got hearts now, take it or leave it. I did post a meme. It was a dumpster fire, and it said on the top, legitimate student concerns, and on the bottom it was Will Ferrell yelling, ignore the fire, because at that point it had just gotten so bizarre. Even that, I was like, well, like we're supposed to not hide unwanted things in the fog, and this seems like, this is kind of the response we've gotten from people, and I think it's so absurd it needs to be pointed out. So like any of those things could have led to their deciding that I was clearly a threat to the platform or something. But and and at that point, I think so many of us were so tired of it. Like we didn't want to keep bringing this up. We just kept pressing because clarity was so important. And the first whisper of people getting refunds was actually a post that T had, and Jordan Fuller responded and basically said, you can get a refund, just write support. And T's response was, no, I don't want a refund. I still want my classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it was so shocking when she did get kicked off, because she had made it explicitly clear on there
Mm-hmm.
that she had no intention of leaving, that she still liked the classes and was planning to stay for at least the duration of the rest of her membership. So
Mm-hmm.
things turned surprisingly hostile very quickly. Like maybe it was a lack of being able to read the room on our part. I think we had built up so much trust over the several months that we all just kind of assumed nothing like that would actually ever happen. And yeah, it was a total shock when I just refreshed my screen and all of a sudden I didn't have access to any of my posts or anything else. Everything was just, I tried to log back in and nothing was there.
Every student on the platform, on the social environment that makes a post, so that writes a message or uploads a picture or something like that, it becomes part of their profile, which means that you can go to, for example, Frankie's page or Dusty's page, and you can see everything they've posted in the past, unless they have deleted it themselves. That's the only exception to this. But you can see everything they've posted. What is very crucial to understand is that when a user gets booted, so thrown off the platform and can't log in anymore and gets a mail in their mailbox that says, here's your money back, all their old posts have been deleted as well. So you cannot go, if you go to their profile, what you will find is that the profile has become private, has no posts whatsoever, and the avatar, so the picture that the person identified with, or the picture that the person used for their profile, it's gone. So you can't see the history anymore. And that's a very big issue, because that means every single post that was made about a specific thing gets deleted, and therefore you can't go back to see what the history is. So now it is impossible to go back to see if Dusty and Frankie posted something that could have been seen, that could have legitimately interpreted as something wrong. You can't see that anymore. You can't make that call anymore because they're gone, and everything they've posted is gone.
Well, that's difficult for the people who are remaining. For the people who are banned, we had no time or warning to get contact information for our friends. There are people that it took us days to track down on the internet because we were worried.
Yeah.
We knew about their life situation, that they would be lonely, that this would be stressful, because we were a really tight-knit community at this point. there are people we had to track down because we weren't willing. Like, thank God, Frankie is a fantastic administrator, brilliant organizer, and gatherer of people. So she kind of had like a network that she expanded really quickly, getting in touch with people who either were banned or were likely to get banned. And so we eventually managed to get in touch with everybody that I know of who was banned, but we don't know who might have been banned without warning that we don't know about yet. Like, we would literally have to go back by memory or in conversations and check people's handles to see if they have no way to reach their friends. But we had no warning to gather our community. Lost all of our course progress. So that's 5 months of my life invested in contributing to a platform and a potential university education, which I'm putting in air quotes because I still am not clear on whether this is a university, a business. Like I'm not clear, but I was definitely investing in an education, which I am now unable to complete. Right? I would like to finish the education that I started. All my progress gone, right? All that progress, all that time, all of my content, and conversations, heartfelt, meaningful, both philosophical and personal conversations with people over a 5 month period. I had no warning to either back it up, export, screenshot, nothing, just gone. And that goes for every single person. And what's incredible is that those of you who are left on the platform, it's become almost a joke where if people post and say, where are our friends and why were they banned? They're all getting banned. It's just, it's at this point a caricature of it. The situation has become a caricature of itself, in my opinion. Like, it is absurd. It's like absurdist humor. I feel like we're living in a Monty Python sketch.
Out of the three of us, I'm the only person still remaining on the platform. So I'm still there, which honestly amazes me because I've also made some posts over there that were, well, I was also voicing my criticism, and not at first. At first, I was trying to, and still am, the posts that I made were aimed at reconciliation.
Yes.
What I was trying to point out to everybody is the fundamental thing. If you ask yourself the question, what went wrong? The answer to that question, in my opinion, is miscommunication. That putting that banner online without any prior communication, that was fault one. When the questions came forward and were not addressed, that was fault two. That creates confusion. It creates speculation. It creates tribalism. It creates groups. We've seen that happen. That stems out of miscommunication. And the post that I was placing over there, after you guys were already gone, were aimed at that. Guys, there's miscommunication here. And there's a lack of empathy. And empathy in this case, I don't mean when I say empathy, what I mean is not I agree with everything that you're saying. When I'm talking about empathy, I mean I understand where you are coming from. Right? And those three different scenarios that we just laid out, those three different types of question, the financial question, the missing feature question, and the information discrepancy question, those need to be answered. That was not being done. They were not being understood. Instead, they got the comment to their head, work harder. That tells me, at least from a business and leadership perspective, you are not listening. You're not understanding what the people on your platform are asking, why they are asking that. It's a fundamental lack of empathy, which leads to miscommunication.
I think that's fair, but I think also we might have a misunderstanding of what Peterson Academy is, right? Because like we talked about at the very beginning, how we invested and how we created community and built the platform from a social, and that sounds almost arrogant unless you were there and you realize that it's true. Like, it is only the people who carried the social side of things, like the essay societies and Poetry Sunday, and we're kind of we were self-moderating, right? Stuff like that. So that is I think there's a disconnect between that and obviously the vision that Mikhaila Fuller and her husband have for the Academy. And I named them because I don't think Jordan Peterson is all that involved, although as her father, I'm sure he will support her and champion her. I think a father would do that. But I think it's primarily her endeavor. And to me, I don't think she saw our questions as representative of her customer base. I think to her customer base is the 40,000 people that are signed up. Most of them don't use the Peterson Academy social. And now with the specials they're promoting, that number is going up more every day. So right now it's 500 ahead. And soon it'll be 20% more than that. And then down the road, it'll be even more than that, you know, especially as they advertise more upcoming features. I don't think we matter. And I don't say that like with bitterness either. I'm like, okay, like apparently, like I don't think we matter in the grand scheme of things. I think we thought that the community fabric aspect of a university mattered. And at that time, we were all kind of part of that. I don't think so. And that's why for me, as I'm moving forward, I really want to answer the question, what is a university? What makes an online university different from an in-person, a brick and mortar university? Can you even have a true online university? What does it need? What needs to be in place for it to really be a university? Because I don't know that online courses equal university. I personally think that the social component, you know, a code of conduct that is not censorious. We should probably talk about the code of conduct, but I think those things are probably so for me, I'm like, I thought it was a university and I'm not sure it is. I'm not saying it's not I think it's a streaming platform.
No, right now with the technology that it is, so it's pretty much like masterclass.com. That's my personal opinion. And if you contrast those two with each other, you can make the argument that Peterson Academy is more in depth, you know, because every course that is available on Peterson Academy is like 6 to 8 lectures. And those lectures are generally between 45 minutes and like 1.5 hours or something like that. And they go very deep. So it's very deep video material. It's not something to be taken lightly. It is a serious course. It's so in that sense it's different than masterclass, because masterclass generally has these 10-minute videos that talk about a very specific thing in a very specific craft, and then moves on to the next video, which is about the next component in that specific craft. So that way it's different. But bottom line is it's still a streaming platform that shows, you know, teaching material with a social aspect. So in my personal opinion, if I contrast those two with each other, especially in the form of what they cost, Peterson Academy is way more expensive. And like Dusty laid out, like you just laid out, Dusty, is it a university?
No, the courses are great. Like I actually want them. I think they should. I don't think they will verbally apologize, but I want my content back. And I think they should actually reinstate us and allow us to at least finish our year. We didn't ask for refunds. We've invested all this time. This is not good business practice. I now have the understanding that this is not a university. My expectations as of now for it are very different, because I don't think it is what we thought it was. So I just want I want the courses though. The course content, I just want to emphasize, I'm not like mindlessly criticizing their content. Their courses rock. I love these profs. I love it. I was in the middle of brain plasticity and I was like, this guy gives me the creeps and I don't want him and Elon Musk teaming up, but I really enjoy knowing. Right? Like, anyways, sorry. Yes, Frankie.
And I want to just offer a different perspective, because I am far more optimistic and not jaded yet than Dusty. And I don't mean that as an insult, Dusty. I think we're good enough friends that you know that.
I don't know if jade is the right word. I think I'm being realistic.
You may very well be. Very, yeah. We're good. Okay, so like, all right, I'm still like probably naively hopeful that the endeavor that the ship can still be righted. Okay, and like, I am still hopeful that, you know, King Richard will return from the Crusades and right everything. And I don't intend that to imply that Mikhaila is the Sheriff of Nottingham. But it's more just like, I really feel like there is yeah, I'm one of those people that like Jordan Peterson enough that Dusty was embarrassed for them. But like, I think that Dr. Peterson has been so far removed from it. My hope is that he is not aware at this point. Our quarrel is not in the slightest like, well, okay, I don't have anything personally against Mikhaila. I just want to see like the confusion dispelled, and I would love to see uh the ability for enough transparency and enough restoration of those of us who were there with full access to speak our minds the way that Jordan Peterson taught us, that you have to risk being offensive to be able to think. Like, that's the kind of thing that I would like to see put back into place. I have this, like, it might be a 1 in a million shot, maybe worse, but like, I hope against hope and all odds that there is still some way that things could be amended. I guess maybe that's the best way to put it. Dusty has this terrible look on her face.
I don't want my face to give an impression that it shouldn't be giving. Bad face. So no, I was making that face not I greatly respect and admire Jordan Peterson, right? Like I've got We Who Wrestle with God queued up. I don't agree with everything he has to say. I don't think he should be trying to teach theology, but I enjoy his philosophical take, like as from like a secular viewpoint. If he comes to Christ, I'm stoked. Like I love the guy. So I have lots of admiration in him. But for me, there's two things that I actually greatly respect that make me cringe a little bit sometimes when we talk about this. I greatly respect the relationship between him and Mikhaila as like father and daughter. And so to me, it's like, well, what is the expectation if we feel like maybe we have disagreement with how she's run things, but it's her endeavor. And I personally think that we had a different understanding of what the vision was than perhaps she did, and it is her company. So I don't think that excuses the way things played out. But where I sit now, I don't have an expectation that it's going to all of a sudden, like when you say right the ship, for me, it's like, well, write it according to whose agenda, because she's running it, right? Like, and Jordan Peterson as a father and as a business person and like and an investor, I'm sure, like gave that to her. So for me, I'm kind of like, okay, if I misunderstood what it is, I respect that. Do you understand? Like,
Sure.
and if he doesn't, like, so that's what my face was. I'm like, well, I respect the fact that maybe I misunderstood the vision. And I respect the fact that he has a loyalty to his daughter. And that to me goes back to what Jeffrey said about communication. Like, if I just super misunderstood the vision, then it's an even bigger communication error that I realize. But I'm happy to say, okay, the vision's not what I thought it was. And if the vision I thought was in place is not the vision they have, I'm not going to try to, not that you're trying to do this, but I just mean like,
No, it's okay.
I'm not trying to, I don't feel like I have a right to like push my idea of the vision on them. What I want is let me friggin' learn at least. That you should at least let me finish the year complimentary at this point, because this was a very stressful week. Like a lot of us didn't sleep. It's no small thing to feel like Jordan Peterson's daughter has put you on the guillotine in front of all your friends. Like it's an interesting experience. And I would like my content, but I have no illusions. I don't want you to call it an illusion. I don't think that like we're gonna like make social something that it like used to be. Does that make sense? Like I think there was a disconnected vision between the people who actually own the place and the people who are there.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to criticize that, but
I would say the only thing I would just add to that is, one, I think, like, I agree with you on that. I guess my hope is that there is still the possibility that the vision that we all thought, because I think it's the vision that Dr. Peterson sold to us on his podcasts and things that we were embodying. Like, I still have some hope, and I like, it's certainly not a pitting Dr. Peterson against his own daughter or anything. That would be terrible. But more of a, like, maybe just if he had eyes on it to see, is this still according to the vision that he has? And if not, is that okay or not? Like, then I feel like I'm totally okay with being wrong. If we're wrong, then we just move on, and that's okay. And I'll still, enjoy doing my best to embody those parts of those different rules that I still agree with, then, you know, standing up straight with one's shoulders back and all of that. Like, it doesn't really negate anything. And it's more just a matter of, okay, what actually is the vision? And is it something that I'm still willing to participate in? Can it be, how far off was it from what we had in mind, maybe?
So yeah, so one of the things that you can do, very simple things that you can do to check if you are wrong, and asking yourself the question is a very good start. And you have been asking yourself the question if you are wrong. But one of the things you can do, and in your case it might be a bit hard because you're banned, so you don't have access to the social environment anymore, but is to look at the criticism that people are giving the people that were asking questions about the whole situation. So if I ask you the question, is there anything that you could have done better, with the context that looking at the criticism that came in either before or after your ban, either on Discord or on Peterson Academy itself, because that is a good input to see if you did something wrong, because they're pointing it out. That's what criticism is. Is there anything in there that you have the idea like, yeah, I could have done that better?
If back then I still, so kind of no. I think that I think with the amount of information that I had, I don't think I behaved poorly. Like I wrote to support. Um, I was polite when I was asking questions. I defended people that I care about. I continually added caveats like, hey, I'm not trying to trash Peterson Academy. If somebody went really harsh and like insulted Mikhaila, I was like, listen, I'm not trying to take it that far. I just want to be clear. Like, I'm just saying the questions are valid. I want answers. Like, I actually I don't think I misstepped with the knowledge that I had. But if I had to do it over again and I knew what I was dealing with, I would have either renewed at Black Friday when it was cheaper for at least a year, or I simply would have chosen not to renew at all. And I would have done that quietly, and I probably would have had all my content saved in case a time came where I was ever arbitrarily removed. And I would have made sure that I had contact outside of Peterson Academy with anybody who mattered to me. And I would have focused on building connections and community on proper in real life socials as well as forums. And I would have utilized and taken advantage of the course content without investing emotionally in the quote unquote vision of community aspect of university that Jordan Peterson had painted for us. I would have left the vision aside and I would have just focused on education and saving my content and contacts.
How about you, Frankie?
That's a great question. I think based off of the feedback I received, and like to give you some extra context, I have gotten emails from people, I have gotten direct messages from people off of the Peterson Academy platform since then, where people were like, thank you so much for saying what you did. So in retrospect, like I don't think I would have changed anything as far as if I hadn't had any further information, if I went back to do it all over again. And I've been asking myself this, like I woke up one morning, I was like, am I mad? Have I gone completely crazy? Because like it just seems like something very strangely extreme just happened, and like did I miss something here? So like I've been asking myself that a lot, and it's not for lack of introspection. And there's a part of me that even hates saying that I wouldn't change anything because it sounds so arrogant to me, but I think like we were feeling things out as best as we could in very murky territory that we didn't really know what was going on, which I think was cause for people's being kind of in a state of minor alarm. Like, hey, we're treading through territory we don't really know what we're getting into. As far as if I could do it all over again with the knowledge I have now, I'll be honest, I don't think I ever would have posted freely on the social aspect at all. Like if I knew that it was not actually a free speech platform, like it helped me out a lot because part of some of the stuff I had been dealing with prior to signing up to Peterson Academy was like just finding my own voice. Like I was a part of a group where it was in my best interest to kind of silence my own voice. And part of my being on the Peterson Academy social and part of the greatest benefit was that I was starting to be able to implement that more. And kind of rebuild stuff that had completely disintegrated in my life. And felt like in a small way, and it's funny because it's virtual, but like it was helping me to reintegrate myself into society after the things that I had been going through. And like that all came because I was under the impression that it was totally free speech. I was able to speak my mind, that we are supposed to tell the truth and all this other stuff. So if I knew what I know now, I think I don't even know if I would have signed up for Peterson Academy. And that's not to be like dramatic. It's just that within the context of I grew up in a very high control society where thoughts and what you said and stuff were very highly regulated. Um, that is the kind of thing that I'm very off put by these days, just because of um, having to have gone against the grain and spoken what I deemed to be perceived to be true in other aspects of my life. And so, like, it was that freedom that I thought we had that drew me to the social aspect and stuff. Like, probably I would have signed up, I would have taken the classes, and I wouldn't have participated and met all of these wonderful friends that I have now. And it's not just to give people a little extra perspective, like I've video called with a bunch of these people. Like it's not like we were just talking on our posts. Like we were doing video calls, we were chatting with each other and stuff. Like we had other forms of communication, and there was a much bigger investment in one another than what was seen
That
even
makes
there.
me emotional. Like,
Sorry.
no, it's just that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you don't treat people that way, right? Like, they're not just customers, they're human beings. That's why I get so defensive and so fired up. Like, you're such a decent person. Like, a little bit of polite communication would have gone a long way
Well,
for
let
that
me
amount of investment.
risk making you cry a little more. Like when I signed up for
I'm gonna
Peterson
fight
Academy,
someone.
like just to give people an idea of just how like precious of a community. I know I sound like an old grandma saying that, but how precious of a community it was. Like when I signed up for Peterson Academy, I felt like I was digging myself out of a kind of hell. Like, and it's very much the stuff that Dr. Peterson talks about on podcasts and things. And when and like while I think I still could have gotten there on my own, like it probably would have taken years because I didn't know what I was doing. But like being able to make the connections I did, it sped that up probably by years. Like what probably would have taken years, and I don't know because I had never faced that kind of um like psychological situation before, but like what probably would have taken a much longer time, I felt like, okay, at some point, probably around October or so, I rounded the corner to where I no longer felt like I was digging myself out of hell. And I was able to start to actually aim up again. And that was something like I'm a relatively goals oriented person. I used to write goal lists and things. I had been trying as best as I could to do that again. But that was the kind of thing that like the social aspect on Peterson Academy, because we all had that shared vision, like it helped me significantly. It completely changed my life. Like my family noticed it. Like it was a big deal. Um, it's something regardless of how all this turned out, I'm still just ridiculously at a loss for words to how grateful I am for it.
See, and I can relate to some of that because, like I said, like I went through a terrible abusive marriage and a divorce early in the year. I lost church community because it was awkward and because some people felt like it was a sin to leave an abusive husband, to divorce an abusive husband. And then my sister basically killed herself with drugs, at the start of August. And then I found myself in this community where people were supportive and all had shared goals and vision. Um, so I get that, and it was helping me. And I had people in my life, like I was talking to people before the drama started with like the dismissive replies from administration. I was talking to people, they were like, well, to be honest, this is helping you so much. Your mind needs the exercise because you can, I'm kind of hyper, I'm mentally hyper. Um, and you need the like-minded people. Like they were saying that it's a good thing, but the people were a huge part of the actual benefit. It wasn't just learning. So I get that.
Yeah, it's very clear that both of you really care a lot about the platform, about the people, about the experiences, about the shared learning, about everything that was possible at Peterson Academy until the new year started. I would like to ask you two more questions, and then with that we'll wrap this up. If there's anything right now that you could say to either the management team, Mikhaila Peterson herself, or Jordan Peterson, what would you say?
Honestly, I guess thanks. Um, Sincere and heartfelt thanks, because even if we were confused in what the ultimate vision was, even that little glimmer of the vision that we had that we were able to perpetuate for the last 5 months was totally worth it. So, no hard feelings, and it would be nice to know what it's supposed to be to see if it's something I can kind of throw my hat back into that ring. But otherwise, and if it's not, that's okay too. Like, I got more than I bargained for and probably still will. So, but no, ultimately just thanks.
Frankie's so much nicer than me. Okay, my off the cuff answer. Um, okay, so with Mikhaila, I would say that's not nice. Um, no, really though, like woman, like because I appreciate like being a woman of business, but it's also important just that you remember the souls behind the screen, which is I think a value she actually holds. If you read the code of conduct and stuff like that, but I think it kind of got forgotten in the chaos. And it's that proverb that Frankie brought up recently. Every man's story seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him, right? First person to tell their story sounds right. I don't know that the perspective of the people who got banned was ever properly heard. But yeah, not nice. But great endeavor. I hope it goes well. I hope that that it works out, that people get an education. I hope that people treat each other well. Um, don't approve of or appreciate the way my content was deleted and I was banned from the platform and cut off from my community with no warning. Like just completely unacceptable. But respect that it's your business. Don't appreciate it. Jordan Peterson, super respect you in your work. Love the guy. Frankie's laughing at me. What? Like, this is just real life. Like, yo. Jordan Peterson's awesome. I also respect that they're family. I don't have any real expectations of him to like. We wrote the open letter. And well, it's not an open letter because we sent it to him. Totally get why that wouldn't get a response. It's their business. It's new. Their family. But I'm not. This is not nice. I'm not very happy about it. That's my take.
I'll just clarify, I wasn't laughing at you. I just appreciate your that our takes on things are just different. I appreciate the different just the different personality sides of it. That's all.
It's funny. The contrast is great.
Dusty, what is the letter that was delivered to Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, so we thought day one, J8th, when we all got banned, the great banning, that it might be a good idea to reach out to Jordan Peterson privately, just to see if he had any input and on free speech grounds. And perhaps he has more years and experience, right? Like he's an older man than the Fullers. So we wrote him this letter, which I guess I'll just read. It's kind of long, but it's a good summary. Okay. So this was sent to him, and we know that at least one professor forwarded it to his personal email on our behalf. So, dear Dr. Peterson, We'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank you and Mikhaila for inviting us to embark on the thrilling adventure that is Peterson Academy. As early adopters and torchbearers, we have come to know that the promised potential of top-tier education and like-minded fellowship was rightly stated. You said early on that the social side of university was one of the primary benefits and would be one of the most important features. We believe you were correct. Peterson Academy Social is a bona fide treasure, a group of highly motivated early adopters sharing their dreams and struggles, arguing and laughing. In only a few short months, a miraculous thing occurred. Real relationships were forged based on a shared ethos of aiming upward and accountability, an ethos of honesty and integrity, transparency, fun, and even ambition. In short, we each in our own ways have aspired to follow your example and take your wisdom to heart. These past 5 months have enriched not only our intellects and knowledge base, but our lives and community. PA Social users may be the minority of 40,000 students, but we feel like a true academy. In our midst are mothers, artists, psychologists, tradesmen, military and veterans, nurses, retirees, those on disability, high school students, everything you can think of. We participate from all over the world, including third world countries. Recently, it came to our attention that our subscription would increase from $450 US to as much as $1,000 in an undisclosed amount of time. Some were able to take advantage of the offer to extend their current subscription for 3 more years. Others could not afford this unanticipated expense. Many simply wanted additional information before investing additional money up front. Unfortunately, requests for clarity were met with vague messaging, despite months of unrealized features. For example, the sign-up page for Peterson Academy suggests that exams for courses exist, but they are not yet available. The dragon of uncertainty reared its ugly head. As a result, as is often the case on PA Social, a heated debate sprang up. Some expressed concern and requested further explanation and assistance. Others made evident their desire for silence from those who were requesting clarity. Humor was deployed by the jesters of Peterson Academy Social, largely in the form of memes, as a lighthearted effort to make it okay to discuss the uncomfortable topic of policy and finances. When Mikhaila quote posted one of the more pointed memes, which had high levels of somewhat relieved engagement, she indicated that the price of $4,000 for 4 years was always the goal, that there was no time to entertain this perspective of people who could not afford an extra $50 US per month, and that perhaps the issue was a general lack of usefulness and work ethic. Much of the community was taken aback by this and continued to ask questions. Some even began questioning whether the foundational ethos of Peterson Academy had changed. On Wednesday, January 8th, at least 5 prominent and prolific members of Peterson Academy Social were banned and refunded without warning. They were given no time to save their content or exchange contact information with fellow students. If 1 or 2 had not already done so, friends would have been lost and community members isolated. One user emailed support requesting an explanation for why she was removed and received the following response: "We have noted your dissatisfaction with the platform and therefore have ended your subscription and refunded your money in full." As this seems punitive, in light of the fact that a refund was neither requested nor desired, and Peterson Academy Social has shown itself to be a very difficult place to be banned from, in light of real trolls who were given multiple warnings over a reasonable period of time, we can only assume these users grievously violated an unwritten rule. This lack of clarity led to a significant shift in atmosphere on Peterson Academy Social, as users wondered what they were and were not permitted to say. The memes, articles, and comments had several different themes. 1. A request for clarification regarding the pricing for legacy students and torchbearers. 2. Clarity on the timeline for subsequent price increases. 3. Questions about accreditation, testing, lack of final exams, and the value of Peterson Academy compared with other institutions and streaming platforms. 4. Concerns over what is and isn't acceptable on Peterson Academy Social, in other words, a code of conduct. 5. Comic relief. 6. Open letters to leadership explaining the students' perspectives and causes for concern. This raises the following questions. Was the expulsion for crossing a line with humor? Was it for bringing up uncomfortable questions the Academy doesn't want to address? Or was it some other breach we have failed to identify as problematic? Dr. Peterson, we have invested our time, hearts, and energy into Peterson Academy because we believe in the values you have been championing for the past decade. Our loyalty and goodwill towards your endeavor are sincere. We cannot help but note the disconnect between your own values, speaking truth, fearlessly asking difficult questions, and aiming upward, and the conduct of this academy towards the students who have been banned. Proverbs 18:17 says, "The first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him." The consensus amongst students is that you are our only hope for restoring the vision, optimism, and perhaps even classically liberal ethos we anticipated at Peterson Academy. We hope you'll turn your attention to the situation and give a fair hearing to the perspectives of both the Academy and the students who have been expelled, though relevant content has since been erased from the platform in conjunction with account removals. Most of the deplatformed students have expressed their desire to stay, as well as a heartfelt commitment to their education and community. We know we are a small minority of enrollees, but we pride ourselves on being torchbearers in this noble educational endeavor, which we truly believe will change the world. Any time and attention you are willing to devote to this matter would mean the world to us, as we hope to continue on this adventure together for years to come. With respect and gratitude, Dusty May Taylor, Frankie Joy Baylor, and other concerned current and former students of Peterson Academy.
Frankie, why do you want to come on this podcast and tell this story?
Honestly, I don't. Um, if I'm being really honest, I have so many hesitations about being on this podcast. Notwithstanding the fact that I had really hoped that, because there was joke of a Peterson Academy cruise ship adventure at some point, and I had really hoped that the first time I ever got to meet or, have my name out there in any conjunction with the Petersons would be just to shake somebody's hand and say, hey. And so, and maybe this will be one of those things where you post it and it goes nowhere, but there's always the chance that it could get bigger and people could run with the story. And I'm very aware of that. And so all of that considered, I am honestly, there's a part of me that's, well, I suppose fearful of the repercussions of being on your podcast, Jeffrey, talking about this. Because this is something that is large enough that 40,000 people thus far that we know of have already accepted. And that's probably a relatively small minority of the people who are aware of the endeavor in the first place. But ultimately, I think there are a lot of people who agreed with us who were afraid to say anything. I know that's the case because a number of them have reached out and a number of them expressed their willingness to have their names put on the letter that we had written to try to reach Dr. Peterson. So I know there are a lot of people who, some of them have varying degrees of willingness to participate. And I suppose it's kind of, I believed I was one of the best people to speak to it just because I accidentally kind of just through participation became one of the bigger members on the platform. Like I posted a meme pretty much every day. So, and people looked forward to that. And I had a pretty large following and stuff on there. And so it seemed appropriate for me to be one of the people to do it. But I will say that it's not, I don't take any pleasure in it, I guess. Like I'm relieved that we get to tell the story. I think that because I weighed this a lot and I discussed it with a lot of people who weren't affiliated with Peterson Academy. I bounced this off of some family and stuff, and I heard a lot of different opinions on it. And ultimately, I asked myself, would my conscience, would I be okay with it if I didn't say anything? And at the end of the day, I decided that I would rather live with the repercussions of whatever this ends up being than to hold my tongue. And so not to say that it hasn't, I don't want to tell you it hasn't been a pleasure to be on your podcast, Jeffrey, but I also want to make it very clear that it's not without a lot of hesitation on my part. Like, there are so many things I would rather be doing, but it seemed important enough that it was worth whatever the risk is and whatever those ramifications are.
Dusty, how about you?
Um, well, it's a true story. It happened to me and people I care about, and I would like to tell it. It's also very interesting. And I believe that, like, it is super interesting. Like, you got to admit, for all that there's been suffering and it was very stressful, what an interesting, unexpected turn of events. Like, I guess that's my high openness, my temperament. When things like this happen, sometimes I'm like, wow, what a very interesting story. Like, what a plot twist and what interesting characters and what conflict of motivations. It's a very interesting story as far as I'm concerned. I also think that there is great value and utility in holding the movements you identify with to account. So accountability within your own cultural, social, or political sphere is extremely important. And if the so-called freedom movement that has sort of blossomed since the atrocity of 2020 is to have any chance of being healthy, there have to be courageous voices from within it who are willing to hold itself accountable. Right. And so I see this as a little bit of that. Here you have a very prominent voice, a leader on the, kind of on the freedom side of things, who, to be fair, is more of a centrist or a libertarian liberal but he's gotten more right. But I just, anyways. So politics are confusing, but you have a prominent leader who has, a voice in politics. He's basically been at battle with the Prime Minister of Canada, as well as the College of Physicians. And he's started this thing, which is supposed to be an answer to the woke universities. And so people in the movement they look to this, right? And then if there's sort of some like strange things going on within it, if we don't call that out early, but for the grace of God, there go I. History will repeat. These great universities didn't devolve into something bad overnight, and it didn't happen because their intentions were poor. You simply have to have accountability, and sometimes that looks like consequences. So to me, I don't feel bad about this. Like, I don't feel like if it did get picked up and people were like, oh, that's not good. Like the people who don't like the freedom movement-ish side of things, it's hard for me to call it the right because I don't think it's a correct conceptualization. Those people already hate Jordan Peterson, right? But the people who love Jordan Peterson might look at this and have questions. And maybe Jordan Peterson would be like, yeah, actually, self-correction is important. So, or we could just be hated and nobody loves us. The left doesn't like us and the right doesn't like us either. And then I don't really care. I've got a book to publish. Like, so. But I love my people too. I feel very protective. I feel very protective of my friends. I don't like what has been done. And I don't like that my content was removed without warning. And I don't like that I don't get to finish the education I spent 5 months investing in. Yeah, I'm not as cautious as Frankie. I sound like such a worse person. Stop being a standard that I can hold myself up to, Frankie.
Oh, see, and I'm hearing you going, wow, I'm such a coward.
Oh. Hey, Jeffrey, why did you want to interview us today? Tell us, Jeffrey. Why did you want to have us on your podcast?
That's a good question. You should be the host of this podcast. I'm tilting towards Frankie's side. So I have been lucky so far to not have been banned. But I have the privilege of knowing how it was at the beginning until, the new year started. And I also have, in some shape or form, the privilege of seeing how it is now. So I can contrast these two with each other. And what I'm seeing right now is, to me personally, it's not good. Although, to be fair, it seems to be rebooting without the people that have been banned. So I'm seeing, questions being asked again, people engaging with each other again in like a productive way. There seems to be a form of relief. Not necessarily to you being gone, but relief to, the drama being gone from the platform. The reason why I wanted to get your stories on is because I truly believe, if I look very deep into myself and into what happened, I believe mistakes were made. I believe the conclusion that we have reached is wrong. I believe you shouldn't have been banned. I believe there was no reason for that. And I also believe that everything boils down to miscommunication, a lack of empathy. And by taking a step back, and by getting rid of those emotions, getting rid of those groups, and just look at the situation, it's very fair to say that better communication and better leadership could have prevented this. So I really hope, since it has been kind of clear that the change from within in terms of the communication, the empathy part, is not really happening, I really hope that getting your stories out there, also for people to hear who can't hear them anymore right now on the platform because you are banned, I hope that will facilitate that change. And the podcast is small, and you guys have been banned, and our reach is not very wide. And that is okay. That is fine. But at least the story is out there. And that is the reason why I wanted to get you on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both for coming on. Frankie, especially to your point, but Dusty, the same goes exactly for you. Coming on, and we're close to 4 hours right now, and telling your story like this, and opening yourself up like this in a public setting, in a conversation that will be published on the internet for everybody to see, that requires courage. So, thank you for that. I truly hope that we'll come to some sort of reconciliation where we can maybe not necessarily go back to what it was, because I think that's an idealistic view, but that at least we can go forward with the mind at rest. I hope we can reach that point, and I hope getting your stories out there will help that come. So, thank you both very much for coming on and telling your stories.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Take care of yourselves. Thank you for following this conversation with Frankie and with Dusty. I really hope that this conversation will help shed light on the things that need to be in the light, and that it will lead to a situation better than right now. And I believe that it'll be very possible. I believe that we can go there. And I believe that the thing that will bring us there is talking with each other and listening to each other and understanding each other and having empathy for each other. And empathy is not, I agree with everything that you're saying. Empathy is, I understand where you're coming from. Empathy builds trust. And we need trust to operate. Thank you for listening, and take care.